The man swung his sword 10,000 times every day. He believed he could become a knight among thousands, but soon he faced the greatest blow of his life. He was defeated by a child who had only been learning swordsmanship for 6 months. The child said, "Mister, you're so weak. If someone like you can become a knight, then what's my upper limit?" A man who had swung his sword for 10 years was defeated by a 10-year-old child. I accepted losing to a child, but I felt extremely unwilling, because when I was little, I was also considered a swordsmanship prodigy in the village. By chance, I became the apprentice of a retired mercenary, and I quickly defeated him. The retired mercenary said I was the most talented child he had ever seen, and that I might become a knight in the future. It was because of his words that my dream began from here. A knight is someone who can slay 1,000 enemies with their own strength, turn the tide of battle, and is also a hero of the entire nation. Knights who end wars are called terminal knights. I originally thought I was the protagonist in the bard's songs, until later I left the village and joined a mercenary group. Only then did I realize that my little bit of talent might not be worth mentioning at all. Every day I was mocked by the group members. Can't even make it as a free mercenary, yet still dreams of becoming a knight. I didn't argue back, nor did I stand up to defend my dignity. I answered myself in my heart. Giving up after just one failure would be too early. After that, I practiced swordsmanship frantically every day. I always believed in myself. If I lacked talent, then I would invest more time. I wanted to become a knight, even if everyone laughed at me for chasing impossible dreams. If I could put in exponentially more effort than others, sacrificing eating and sleeping time, as long as I kept swinging my sword, swinging and swinging again, wouldn't I get one step closer to my dream? Looking at the sword marks I had carved into the wall, another thought crossed my mind. If I couldn't become a knight, was there a possibility of becoming a seasoned soldier? Though I thought this way, my heart was extremely resistant to the idea. 3 years passed like this, and I became a squad leader of a small unit. The squad I was in was the 4th squad under the 4th small team of the 4th squadron. This morning, I opened my eyes and found it very noisy outside. At that moment, the burly man beside me found a huge bug in his shoe. His rough voice made me feel even more annoyed, so I said, "It's just a bug. What's all the fuss about? My name is Anklid, and I'm the squad leader of this group of oddballs who caused trouble everywhere and were exiled here. Today, we had a tough battle to fight. Although I had reached this point through constant training, I actually felt this should be my limit, but as long as I didn't let go of the sword in my hand, I wouldn't give up on my dream. However, on this day, my nightmare appeared. I was pierced through the throat by his casual strike. I never expected to be so helpless before this person. Gradually, I knelt to the ground and fell silent. My consciousness came to a dark space. I struggled to lift my head. I seemed to see a purple fire burning in front of me. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying intact on the bed. I touched my throat and found there was no wound at all. The burly man beside me was once again startled by the bug in his boot. This scene seemed very strange to me, because all these images felt familiar. Soon, I experienced 2 identical battles on the same day, and I was once again pierced through the throat by the enemy soldier. Then came the 3rd time I was pierced through the throat. Then the 4th time, everything was like a nightmare that couldn't be shaken off. At this moment, I finally understood that I was completely repeating the same day. As long as I couldn't kill the knight on the other side, my life would keep repeating the same day. But this excited me, because I had unlimited chances to die. Couldn't this hone my skills? As expected, I was once again killed by his sword through the throat. This was already the 17th time I had seen his blade. I often wondered, if I worked harder at swinging my sword, if I was faster, could I defeat him? After this death, my consciousness came to this dark space again. Behind me was a woman carrying a lantern and rowing a boat. She asked, "Do you really think this way? You will experience the despair of being unable to overcome high walls in the future." But naturally, I didn't believe her words. There was nothing that couldn't be defeated through effort. Clang, clang, clang. My companions outside the tent were hitting pots and spoons again. As expected, I woke up once more. This was the 18th rebirth. I sat up directly, and the burly man beside me praised me for getting up quite decisively today. I glanced at his boot indifferently and said, "Rem, there's a bug in your boot." Rem looked into his boot with those wise eyes of his. He was so scared that he cursed, and indeed saw a bug inside. The next moment, he directly crushed the bug with his foot. He complained, "You must have put this bug in there. How can you play such childish pranks?" I said, "I just happened to see it crawl in." I looked meaningfully at the ground. The twitching little bug on the ground was already the 18th time I had seen its corpse. I didn't know how many more times I would have to see the bug's corpse before I could escape today's loop. After coming out, I turned to Rem and said, "I want to relearn Beast's Heart, please teach me." Rem was stunned. He said, "Captain, you seem a bit different today. Didn't you want to learn before but gave up? Can you really calm down and learn now?" In the afternoon, I once again participated in the melee battle between Nerelia and Asben. In this battle, I once again lost my life and restarted a new day. Each time after revival, I would ask Rem to teach me Beast's Heart, but until now, I still couldn't face the blade thrusting toward me directly, until I experienced this battle for the 21 stones time. I had repeatedly memorized all the dangers on the field. I threw my head back and dodged the flying arrow. Then came the attack from behind. I blocked it with my shield. Then I looked at Bell from another squad. If things continued like this, that captain would definitely die. With a bang, the moment the arrow fell, I immediately came to his side and deflected the attack. After this last target was finished, I turned my gaze to the enemy soldier. In my view, the most troublesome one right now was this soldier. I had already been pierced through the throat by this guy more than 20 times. So this time I strengthened my resolve. I must survive this battle. Just when that knight charged over, I suddenly remembered what Rem had said to me before: "You always close your eyes at dangerous moments. But if you do that, you might never improve for the rest of rest of your life. Then he once again swung the axe in his hand toward me. Just as he said, I once again closed my eyes. He told me, if you keep doing this, you'll definitely die on the battlefield. To overcome this isn't actually very difficult. Just be brave, don't get excited easily, and don't panic. Most importantly, you must know what death is, and this is his most important skill: Beast's heart. At this moment, I suddenly opened my eyes. The swordsman in front once again used his sword to thrust at me. My eyes stared deadly at the sword. If I wanted to dodge this sword, I had to ignore death. I asked myself, was I really afraid of death? The answer I got was negative, because death would only make me stronger. At this moment, I finally dodged his attack. The only time I dodged his attack in more than 20 loops. At this time, my heart was beating wildly. The knight opposite was obviously stunned. I was the first to dodge his attack. This dodge gave me extraordinary progress and confidence. Then, I immediately spun my body, wanting to kill the soldier opposite. But what I didn't expect was that the soldier's reaction speed was actually faster than mine. The next second, that cold sword once again pressed against my throat. With a swoosh, I was once again defeated by him. After my body died, my soul saw the ferryman from before. She told me to give up quickly, to board the boat with her and end this endless loop. I didn't answer, but thought about why that soldier's spinning speed was so fast just now. But the more such enemies there were, the more excited I became. So I wouldn't board the boat with the ferryman. Even if I kept looping the same day, I wouldn't give up. I woke up again, hearing Rem's familiar questioning by my ear. But this time I didn't respond to his words. Instead, I was thinking about how to survive under that soldier's sword. Soon, I died under the soldier's sword more than 10 times again. Finally came the 33rd loop. This time my turn was faster than his. But what I didn't expect was that I once again died under his sword. This guy's speed was simply too fast. Catching up to his speed couldn't be achieved in a day or two. When I fell, the necklace around my neck faintly glowed blue. This made me recall several commissions I received during my mercenary period. That commission was to deal with several monsters. It wasn't a must-take job, because it was just a request I suddenly received when passing through a village. But I still helped them, because my dream was to become a knight, and knights should protect the weak. That poor village had nothing to give me. They gave me a blue necklace saying it was a protective charm. I stared at it for a long time, but didn't think this thing was a treasure. The village chief said to me earnestly, as a reward for risking your life, this is really insignificant, but this necklace can fulfill your most desired dream. Now thinking about it, it might be because of this pendant's existence that I kept repeating today's loop. The enemy soldier slowly raised the sword in his hand and said, "This is my final mercy to you." I stared at him angrily. Where was his mercy? He had killed me more than 30 times. In my eyes, this soldier was a bloodthirsty killer. With a swoosh, after his sword fell, I once again ended today's loop. Clang, 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 the familiar sound of pot and spoon hitting again. This time when I woke up, I was much calmer. I said to Rem, "I put a bug in your boot." Rem said angrily, "What kind of joke are you playing so early in the morning? Have you finally gone crazy?" I stamped my foot heavily. I said, "Stop dawdling, hurry up and come out to teach me Beast's heart." Rem started muttering, "Before I told you to learn, but you wouldn't. Now when I don't want to teach you, you want to learn." Although he was puzzled, he was still very serious when sparring. This time during practice I didn't blink, but stared deadly at the axe in his hand. Rem's axe quickly came toward my face, but this time was different from before. I successfully dodged it. Rem was very surprised, thinking, how did the squad leader improve so quickly? After the practice ended, he asked me what I had done to become so much braver. This couldn't be achieved through training alone. But how could he know this was willpower I had honed through death, a feeling learned through dying? I said, "Don't think so much. We still have a battle to fight this afternoon. Hurry up and train with me." If I only learned Beast's heart but didn't learn a one-hit kill sword technique, I might still die. Rem saw that the squad leader was so spirited, so he might as well practice with this captain. For the next 2.5 hours, I kept dodging Rem's attacks. Soon Rem's attacks could no longer hit me, but I was also very exhausted. Rem shouted, "Squad leader, how long are you going to keep dodging? You can't win battles on the battlefield by just avoiding attacks." With a whoosh, Rem's attack was once again dodged by me. My current swordsmanship was simply not enough to contend with Rem. Although I felt somewhat unwilling, I now only knew that one killing move. Then I spread my legs and assumed a stance, waiting for Rem to come in front of me. Rem was startled. How did this squad leader's aura suddenly change? At this time, I unconsciously began imitating that swordsman's attack. I leaned forward and thrust out the sword in my hand, but the sword in my hand was still knocked away by Rem's axe. What shocked me wasn't that the sword was knocked away, but that I had just used that swordsman's thrust. His attack seemed to be carved into my body. I unconsciously used it. I clenched my fist, because I had been killed by that move dozens of times. My body already had muscle memory. Rem scratched his head and said, "You should have bled a little just now. That thrust you just used was the most decent move, but the power still wasn't enough." I understood what he meant. If I had enough power just now, my palm should have bled. Rem transformed into a combat instructor and said, "In other words, your sword just now had other factors in it." My eyes stared deadly at Rem, listening carefully to what he said. Rem continued, "You need one thought, which is that you can't run away this time. Only with such determination can you hurt your opponent." I understood Rem's words. The only flaw when I fought with that swordsman was that my sword lacked confidence. So every time during direct confrontation, I would be killed by his sword through the throat. But I firmly believed that in the next battle, I definitely wouldn't die by his hand. However, unfortunately, when the real decisive battle came, I still died by his hand. After more than 10 loops, I still died under his sword each time. Until the 110th loop, I once again died by the swordsman's hand. Filled with unwillingness, I once again dragged Rem to practice with me. And in this training session, I finally had a breakthrough. Rem stared at the blood spurting from my hand in shock and said, "You guys really have gone a bit crazy." I could see that due to excessive force, a burst of blood had spurted from my palm. But what surprised Rem was that I was actually laughing. I was laughing because I had finally successfully learned this move, until another new loop arrived. I had the big-eyed boy help me find leg armor, as well as shield and short sword. I'd pay him later. The big-eyed boy readily agreed, but he didn't support credit. The money must be given to him within a week. Everyone felt I was a bit off today, but they didn't say anything. Instead, they obediently followed behind me. They felt today's squad leader was somewhat abnormal, with a murderous look on his face, not knowing who he wanted to kill. Accompanied by the collision of shields and swords, a new round of battle began. Although I could completely feel the pain and the agony of each death, I chose not to escape. Even if the guy opposite was an opponent I couldn't beat, even after challenging him tens of millions of times, I still wouldn't choose to escape, because I didn't know what would happen after running away, whether tomorrow would come after waking up. But if that really happened, I couldn't improve every day, and could only be like an ordinary soldier in the mercenary group. So no matter how many loops I experienced, I must defeat the knight opposite, and I also had to climb over the wall behind him. Due to my repeated practice of Beast's Heart and learning the thrust, my confidence grew wildly. After preparing everything, I once again stepped onto the battlefield. It was time to take another step forward. Our side began blowing the horn of war. Standing behind me were all the members of my squad, but one thing worth mentioning is that each of them was a top expert, and I was the weakest one in this squad, but they made me the squad leader. And next I had to lead them to win today's battle. Without any talent, what I relied on to survive on the battlefield was trust and calm composure. I remember in my 46th loop, my left shoulder was smashed to pieces by a guy with a mace. On the 47th today, I dodged the mace attack by rolling, but was still killed by others. So today I eliminated all disadvantages and killed those people in advance. What made me most angry was in my 71st loop, I was slashed in the leg by a guy lying on the ground. With a clang, as I expected, a sharp sword hit my leg, but this time I wore armor. My body sank heavily downward, and the shield in my hand directly smashed his head. Every scene on the battlefield was imprinted in my mind, and I also used previous memories to save many people. And next was when I had to face this wall. Soon, just as I predicted, the two of us once again stood on opposite sides. This time the swordsman struck first. His attack was still as sharp as before, but I already knew his attack. I immediately held my shield in front. Then, I unhesitatingly threw away the shield in my hand, because I couldn't win against him by dodging and thrusting. Although this ordinary soldier in front was very strong, I had already found a breakthrough point. That was this guy's lack of experience. He would easily panic. I took advantage of this gap and directly headbutted his chest. Then I used my foot to kick up a clump of dirt from the ground. Then I kicked it hard at his face, wanting to confuse his vision. And next was when I would make him show an opening. I jumped up pretending to attack him. The swordsman's heart hardened, feeling his counterattack horn had come. Then he jumped and used a thrust attack on me, but this was within my expectations. I twisted my neck and dodged it. Our two figures crossed at light speed, but the moment our bodies crossed, the swordsman reacted and immediately turned around. I seized the opportunity and directly cut off his sword with one strike. This way his attack would end here. The swordsman's heart was full of disbelief. This was the first time he had ever failed. At this time, I had already assumed my stance, ready to give the swordsman a fatal blow. However, just at this moment, an arrow flew from behind me, but this arrow was broken in midair by Rem's axe. At the same time, my battle with the swordsman also came to an end. My sword steadily pierced his neck. This battle took a total of 150 loops, meaning I died by his hand 149 times, and this time I won. I finally killed him. The next moment, I swung the sword in my hand and cut off the swordsman's head. This meant that the wall I couldn't break through had been broken by me. Just when I was immersed in joy, I felt someone kick me from behind. The power of that kick directly sent me flying more than 10 meters away. My team members were very shocked to see this scene. Rem sensed something was wrong and immediately came to my side. There was actually a frogman here. A humanoid frog-faced creature was staring at me. Could it be that I encountered a new wall today? I was just kicked by him once, and I felt unbearable pain and couldn't stand up. The frogman said, "He was someone I spent great effort to cultivate, and you actually killed him." I glared at him through gritted teeth. That attack just now had caused me too much damage. With my current strength, even if I looped 1,000 times, I wouldn't be his match. Just when the frogman's attack came, Rem suddenly appeared and blocked the attack. Rem's attacks were very fast. He began counterattacking in just an instant. Their attacks kept making banging sounds in the air. For a moment, they were evenly matched. Taking advantage of this gap, a soldier from the enemy camp picked up a spear wanting to kill me, but he was directly killed by another team member who rushed over from our side. The frogman couldn't take down Rem for a while, so he immediately withdrew and retreated, maintaining distance first. Rem didn't dare be careless. He assumed a stance waiting for the next round of attack. He felt the opponent's strength was very strong, but defeating him would also take some effort. The frogman said puzzledly, "With your level of strength, why do you protect that weak squad leader?" But my mind wasn't on his words at all. Instead, I was thinking about how to kill him with one strike. The frogman's brain spun rapidly. Why would such a remarkable guy appear in such a low-level battle? If he wanted to take Rem's life, he would have to risk his own life first. So in his view, this battle was very unprofitable, because this battle didn't have that much value. So he didn't want to continue fighting, and turned to leave the battlefield. Rem felt relieved while also cursing the other party as a coward. He swung his axe down again, directly killing two soldiers from the enemy camp. The urgent matter was to take the squad leader away from here. here. Along this road, these soldiers seemed to have GPS navigation. Their target was surprisingly consistent, but all their attacks were blocked by my team members, who safely escorted me away. But soon we were surrounded again. There were countless enemies. But at this time, the enemy soldiers suddenly shouted the retreat command. After hearing this news, I also closed my eyes because I was too tired. I once again came to the dark space. The ferryman said, "Many walls will appear in the future. You absolutely can't get through them. You can only give up after being frustrated. This is your only fate." After hearing the word fate, I slowly got up. I said, "I will absolutely never submit to fate in this lifetime. And the walls you mentioned only exist for me to climb over them." The ferryman said, "Then let's wait and see. I will make those ambitious eyes of yours lose their light." When I woke up again, it was already 2 days later. Rem helped me recall what happened before. He was the one who saved me from the frogman's hands. His words made my wounds ache faintly. "So that last one was a frogman?" I couldn't see clearly at that time. Rem said, "The doctor said you don't have fractures, but your brain was impacted. Can you still remember that I'm your buddy?" I directly turned my head away and said, "I was never friends with you, noble hunter." But before I could finish my words, Rem's palm directly covered my mouth. He said, "Shut up. How can you casually say such secrets?" Having escaped the curse of the previous 3 months, I finally survived and welcomed the second day. This is my team member Clay's, and it was because of him that I could be arranged in such a good hospital room. If it were before, if I got injured, I could only go to an ordinary nursing home. This is my 4th squad member Jackson. What he's best at is assassination. He handed me an ointment and said, "This is an ointment I use when I get injured. Use it once in the morning and evening. Never tell anyone where you got this thing." Not just the two of them. Another team member was also in this hospital room. He was Odin. Listening to his chatter, I found it a bit verbose. It would be better to let him go back and rest well first. These people came to visit me one after another today. Were they worried about me? If it were normally, they were used to going their own way and wouldn't come to see me at all. At this time, another blonde boy eating an apple came into my tent. He was Ragnar. He asked me why I was still lying in the medical device. From his words, I felt he didn't care about me at all. This made me laugh involuntarily. I thought he came to care about me. Now in this medical device besides me, there were 2 other soldiers. Just when I was preparing to rest well, knocking sounds came from my door. The other 2 people also looked over curiously. A young officer with a pair of elf ears. After she came here, she asked who was the captain of squad 444. This startled me. What did she come here to find me for? Was there something wrong? Then I responded that I was the squad leader anklet of this squad. She praised, "I heard you led the difficult squad members very well. I look forward to your performance." Her words made me very puzzled. Did she come here just to praise me? Just when I thought she was about to leave, she stopped again. The elf captain turned and asked the blonde man behind her, "What's your name?" The blonde man was somewhat at a loss and casually said, "My name is Kron." "That's right, I'm called Kron." His name sounded like a made-up name. Could he also be a noble? The elf captain looked at him meaningfully. Then she didn't say much more and turned to leave. The conversation between the two made me very speechless. She actually didn't intend to pursue such an obviously fabricated name. With the rising of the sun, a new day was about to come. I clenched my fist tightly. After a moment, I loosened and raised my hand. My body had recovered almost completely. I had strength again. I must hurry up and train. When I was preparing to leave, the mustachioed man behind me said, "Just a low-level soldier. Who are you putting on a show for, going to the training ground so early?" And that man named Kron just stared at me without saying a word. Soon I arrived at the training ground. I began reviewing the last battle. If my final moment's full force thrust failed, then I would die. This all-or-nothing method wasn't suitable for me. If I couldn't loop, I would have died countless times already. If each of my strikes could have deterrence like Rem's, then I could use full force thrusts. Just then a man's voice came, really so serious. "Have you been standing here all morning?" I don't know when Kron had already stood beside me. He asked me why I was standing here holding a sword in a daze. I looked at the sword in my hand and told him I was reviewing the last battle. This was helpful for my experience. Kron said puzzledly, "Do you as a small soldier need to go to this extent? If you just want to live, then after preserving your life, what do you want to become?" I looked into Kron's eyes for a long time. Actually, I wanted to become a knight, but saying it out loud would invite mockery. This dream had already reached its limit before my talent reached its peak. It was completely unreachable, but I had never stopped yearning for that dream. Then I raised the sword in my hand confidently and said, "My dream is to become a knight. As long as I survive, I will definitely become a knight." A breeze passed by. Kron's face seemed to be blown by a touch of autumn coolness in his heart, but this wind also carried warmth. Respect for a small person who wouldn't give up on an unreachable dream. Seeing that Kron didn't speak, I looked over again. This was the first time in all these years I had seen someone who didn't mock me. He was really special. Kron smiled slightly and said, "Sorry, I forgot to mock you just now. I suddenly remembered something." Then he turned around to leave. After seeing me, he knew what to do in the future. His words made me somewhat confused, but I felt this person was somewhat unusual. Before leaving, Kron said to me, "If you become a knight, you must remember my name, my friend." A hint of surprise appeared in my eyes. This was the first time someone had cheered me on. Time passed quickly to the army's morning training time. Some people chatted, saying that Cyprus was coming to the military camp. They especially worshipped this Cyprus. The mustachioed man also got up, but he hadn't received the punctual breakfast delivery yet, so he cursed loudly. After training, I didn't go to the training ground again, but casually took a walk. During this time, I saw Jack Jackson, I thanked him for the medicine he gave me yesterday. He wiped his pointed knife and said, "You don't need to say thanks. Returning to the team early is what we want to see." Soon it was evening. Kron and I said goodnight to each other. The room was particularly quiet, because there were only 3 of us in this tent. When I woke up the next day, my head felt a bit heavy. The people outside were still talking about Cyprus coming to the military camp soon. The mustachioed man also cursed as usual about why breakfast hadn't been delivered yet. This familiarity made me feel extremely shocked, because I had experienced these yesterday too. This made my heart pound. What was going on? Then I came outside the tent like yesterday, and met Jackson again. To verify my suspicion, I said to him, "Thank you. Your medicine is really good." He repeated yesterday's words, "You don't need to say thanks. Returning to the team early is what we hope to see." But his words shocked me to the extreme. It was indeed as I suspected. I remembered the ferryman's words from before, "There will be walls blocking your steps ahead. You will eventually board the boat with me in despair." So I concluded that I was killed last night. I didn't even notice how I died. Compared to that thrusting soldier, this time I felt utterly powerless. My mood was terrible. Although somewhat dejected, I didn't give up, because only this way could there be the joy of climbing over walls. It was also time to challenge again. New enemies, new special moves. In a blink of an eye, time passed, and it was evening again. I lay in bed, pondering who had killed me. If it were enemy forces, they would have had to break through all the defenses to charge in here. At the very least, it would take someone of knight-level skill. I widened my eyes, having a suspicion in my mind. This was definitely a premeditated assassination ambush, and the assassin was most likely an insider. I suspected that the person who assassinated me was the elf captain who came to the tent this morning, because elves move both quietly and swiftly, making them perfect for assassination work. If that were truly the case, then I was in serious trouble, because I was no match for her at all. Moreover, her inexplicable visit to the tent today was definitely to scout the location in advance. So I turned my gaze toward the tent flap at the entrance. I had to witness with my own eyes whoever I would see later. When the time came, I would just need to shout assassin and wake up the surrounding soldiers. As long as I could see the person, then this incident wouldn't be too much of a crisis. With a soft thud, a poison needle pierced my neck. This poison needle paralyzed my entire body, making it impossible for my body and throat to make any sound. It seemed this was a paralysis poison needle, so this was the cause of my death. And I saw that squad leader Bensiji was also dead. I struggled to lift my eyelids and saw a cloaked figure standing before Kron. That person must have killed the 2 of us first, then killed Kron. With another soft thud, just as I had guessed, a cold blade pierced straight through Kron's throat. At the same time, another cloaked figure walked in. When I saw that cloaked figure, I stared in shock with wide eyes. That person had long ears and carried special weapons that didn't belong to the human race. And this person was the elf captain of the 4th squad. When I revived the next day, I pondered deeply. Last night, I had been very vigilant, yet I couldn't detect any movement. This hell-level dungeon was too difficult for me. Even if I could withstand the assassin's attack on me, I would still be unable to defeat the captain in subsequent combat. This deep sense of powerlessness enveloped my entire body. I had experienced this damned feeling just a few days ago as well, that existence that once haunted me like a nightmare. However, the difference was that I was still the one who won in the end, though it cost me hundreds of times the effort. So facing this enemy, I still had no intention of giving up. There would always be a way to solve this. Then I directly pulled off Mustachioed Man's blanket and told him to get up quickly. I felt the enemy must have ambushed inside the tent in advance, but after patrolling all around, I didn't see any trace of the enemy. Since that was the case, then the enemy must have launched a surprise attack from outside. After being woken up by me, Mustachioed Man said displeasedly, "What use is training for a low-ranking soldier like you? I bet your limit is just a squad leader." I couldn't be bothered to waste words with him. With someone who held such resentment about life, I had nothing to chat about. At this moment, Kron walked in. He saw that we were arguing again. He said apologetically, "How about I come back after you two finish arguing?" I told him to come in. Mustachioed Man and I had finished arguing. Then I observed Kron with the corner of my eye. The assassins had specifically confirmed something back then, so those assassins were definitely targeting Kron. So I became curious about Kron. What exactly was his background? If Kron didn't bring it up himself, I generally wouldn't insist on asking about their origins, just like how I treated my squad members. Although they acted like lunatics, I never asked about their backgrounds. But this time, because Kron had dragged me into an assassination, I couldn't ignore him like before. So I directly asked, "What exactly is your background?" Kron was somewhat speechless, saying, "Is this how you ask questions, directly inquiring about someone's background?" I also felt this was somewhat inappropriate. Asking this way was indeed too direct. It seemed my communication skills really weren't good. Sure enough, as I had guessed, Kron didn't reveal his background. But this time was different. I had to get to the bottom of this, otherwise I couldn't solve this matter at all. Kron told me not to ask him anymore, because the situation was very complex and he couldn't say more. Seeing Kron's very firm attitude, I could only stop questioning. But Mustachioed Man behind me said anxiously, "You two keep talking. You've gotten my curiosity all worked up." Since Kron was impolite and didn't look like someone from this country, Mustachioed Man thought he might be an enemy spy. Hearing this, Kron glared fiercely at Mustachioed Man, showing an imposing expression he shouldn't have had. Mustachioed Man was startled and became somewhat afraid. It seemed this Kron was no small character either. Kron slowly walked in front of Mustachioed Man. His expression was extremely serious as he said with conviction, "I would absolutely never betray the kingdom." From Kron's eyes and his actions, I sensed something extraordinary. That knight-like dignity actually overlapped on Kron's body. Mustachioed Man cursed angrily, "Did you just act disrespectfully toward your superior?" Kron smiled and said to him, "I was merely reporting to you, with no other meaning." I didn't think Kron was a knight. After all, like me, he was helplessly killed by the assassin. But I felt he might have origins comparable to a knight's, very possibly a prince or similar figure. Soon it was time for us to sleep. I bid goodnight to both of them. Mustachioed Man was exceptionally well behaved today, probably scared by Kron's imposing manner. Then I glanced again at the tent flap at the entrance. If the assassin burst in right away, all three of us would die. Thinking this, I couldn't sleep at all, so I got up directly. Mustachioed Man asked puzzledly, "What are you wandering around for in the middle of the night instead of sleeping properly?" I told him, "The assassin is about to arrive. If you want to live, help me," Mustachioed Man said with a blank face. "What exactly are you talking about?" Then he didn't take this matter to heart at all and turned over to sleep directly. Kron, lying in bed at the moment, also wasn't asleep. Hearing us bicker, he thought I was joking. I looked at both their reactions. Their responses were all within my expectations. But just then, I heard a terrifying voice. "How exactly did you discover me?" However, when I came to my senses, I had already been pierced through the throat. I really wanted to know how he had managed to do it. After hearing the voice, I had placed my hand over my weapon, but before I could even touch it, he killed me. The assassin moved with lightning speed, killing Mustachioed Man with one swift throw of his blade. Then, with one leap, he drew the sword from his waist and killed Kron as well. This speed was so fast it was horrifying. When I revived the next day, I thought, without convincing evidence that an assassin would come, and no way to get help from Benzaji and Kron, there was probably no way to get support by reporting to superiors either. So I planned to ambush the assassin by timing his appearance, shouting out before he could act. Just then, rustling sounds came from the door curtain. I knew the moment had arrived. I had to shout out right now. However, the moment I opened my mouth and said one word, a sharp sword pierced through my throat. At this moment, my body hadn't even fallen, but the assassin's body had already swiftly approached the other two. On the fifth loop, I gave up seeking external help and prepared to launch a surprise attack at the specific time. But just as I was thinking of countermeasures, I was once again silently assassinated. On the sixth revival, I heightened my vigilance, not even blinking my eyes. However, I failed again this time. As long as I couldn't avoid that person's poison needle, no matter how I resisted, I had no chance of winning. Even after the 20th revival, the situation still showed no improvement. The deep sense of powerlessness made me scratch my head, unable to think of new countermeasures. But the next moment I laughed. I had only died 19 times. Compared to dying over 100 times before defeating the swordsman, this was nothing at all. I began targeting my objective. First, I had to focus on how to avoid the poison needle, then how to fight the opponent. And in my squad, there happened to be an expert in this type of combat. This person was Jackson, who was very skilled at assassination. Ram once asked me why I called Jackson the sneaky wildcat. I said Jackson was very formidable. If it came to dirty tricks, probably no one could match him. He rarely engaged in direct confrontation, always preferring to circle behind opponents, stab them, and run. Seeing my arrival, Jackson asked puzzledly, "Is there something you need from me?" I thought to myself, if I brought this guy along, I should be able to easily defeat the assassin. But as a squad leader, I had no authority to take him with me. Even if I could possibly take him, I wouldn't, because scaling high walls had to be done by myself. Others couldn't help me. So I planned to seek Jackson's advice. I asked him, "If someone like you stabbed me from behind, how should I defend against it?" Jackson thought seriously for a moment. He said, "I don't know how to defend against it either, because among the enemies I've assassinated, I've never seen any survivors." His words shocked me immensely. Was this the confidence that came from being strong? However, Jackson still gave me a decent answer. "If you want to avoid assassination from people like us, you just need to grow a pair of eyes on the back of your head." His words left me speechless. How could a person possibly grow 2 more eyes on the back of their head? So I asked him what exactly I should do to grow a pair of eyes on the back of my head. He pointed to the handcart behind the camp. I was amazed. From such a far distance, he saw it without turning his head. Could he really have eyes on the back of his head? Jackson said matter-of-factly, "That handcart is going to break." Sure enough, after he finished speaking, that handcart really did break. And this was Jackson's method. Very terrifying, sending chills down one's spine. These operations completely overturned my worldview. How exactly had he done it? Jackson didn't keep me in suspense either, telling me his secret straightforwardly. He pointed to his own ears. The reason he could predict the cart would break was because his ears heard it. Jackson heard the abnormal sound of the wheel joint shaking. As long as you hear it in advance, you can predict what will happen next. I hadn't expected Jackson's ears to be so sensitive. I hadn't even heard the handcart sound. Jackson stood up and said, "You can try listening to all the sounds around you, nimbly capturing sounds." I laughed. "You answered quite thoroughly today. You usually seem somewhat impatient." Jackson indicated that he was indeed quite annoyed, but compared to being constantly questioned, explaining everything at once would be better, because he felt that recently I seemed abnormally persistent about certain things. If I didn't get answers, I would absolutely never give up. That night, I lay in bed thinking again. This was the second wall I had encountered, and this time was even more difficult than the last, because this time I couldn't see the enemy at all, yet it could also be said to be very simple. If being able to see the enemy meant I could survive, then I just needed to improve my ear sensitivity. My hearing gradually extended outward, and I heard regular footsteps. Those were the patrol soldiers. Beside the patrol soldiers, I heard the crackling sound of burning. That was the campfire. At the same time, outside the tent, as I was sensing the surrounding sounds, the assassin's presence quietly descended. With a soft pat, the assassin's presence landed on the ground. But that sound was extremely light. I couldn't hear it at all. Just as I was still still thinking about where the assassin's sound was, the assassin's figure outside disappeared. What followed was a sharp pain in my throat. Then I couldn't make any sound. When I revived the next day, I sat on the bed pondering again. It seemed I had failed again last night. So far, there hadn't been the slightest breakthrough. So I found Jackson again. He told me that just by listening, I could obtain a lot of information. By relying on the direction and intensity of sounds, I could master positions. If I could clearly hear faint sounds from far away, then my ears would be no different from eyes. At this moment, Jackson's fingers slid lightly, creating friction sounds in the air. He told me that sound was vibration. No matter how quiet this vibration was, it resonated everywhere. As long as I could pick it out from hundreds and thousands of vibrations, then all problems would be solved. After listening to Jackson's explanation, I came to a place with many people and began capturing the sounds I could hear. Among these interwoven vibrations would be many sounds. I had to pick them out individually. For instance, I could hear the sound of flags, but if there were dozens of flags here, then I couldn't distinguish them. There were also soldiers not far away. From right to left, nearby were 3 soldiers, while far away were the footsteps of 2 soldiers. I had to calm my mind and feel all these sound vibrations. There were also unfamiliar sounds, like the sound of bird wings and leaves falling to the ground. At this moment, Kron came before me and said, "Anchi, what are you training this time?" I said, "I'm not called Anchi, I'm called Anklid." However, Kron didn't seem to care what I was called. He just felt the name Anchi suited me well. I sighed and couldn't be bothered to argue, saying, "If you want to call me that, then call me Anchi. I'm just sitting here foolishly. Why would you think I'm training?" Kron chuckled and said, "You don't seem like someone who would foolishly waste time." It seemed this Kron understood me quite well. I was quite curious about his background. At night, I was assassinated by the poison needle again. The next day was the same. I was assassinated by him before I even saw the assassin's figure. Every time before dying, I could clearly see Kron's expression when he was assassinated. This was already the 33rd failure. I was getting anxious. The opponent was too fast. I couldn't see clearly at all. And the 34th loop was about to begin. The assassin's figure quietly descended. The moment the assassin's figure descended, I indeed couldn't hear any sound. So I continued looping in failure. Now I was no longer as impatient as before, but continuously improved my hearing. Because I understood one principle. Scaling high walls didn't require opportunity, enlightenment, or help. Only by doing the purest things could I improve my strength and defeat the assassin. So I began endless cycles. Every day experiencing the same day, doing the same things. At this moment, I suddenly opened my eyes during my cultivation. In front of me was Kron. My expression startled him greatly. He said, "I approached you quietly. How did you know and suddenly open your eyes? Could it be your training to sense movement?" It was precisely Kron's arrival today that made me understand the time had come. My training had improved by a level. At night, the assassin once again threw the poison needle in his hand. But this time, his assassination was dodged by me. This was an experience I'd never had in the previous dozens of attempts. I quickly drew the sword from under my pillow. Before the assassin could react, I slashed horizontally at him. The assassin was startled by my movement and instantly fell to the ground. This was completely unexpected for him. The assassin's face showed panic. This was his first failure. I chuckled, showing a gentle smile on my face. "After being assassinated so many times, I finally caught you." After seeing himself exposed, the assassin immediately drew the sword from his waist and swung it at me. But this sword didn't do much damage to me. I easily dodged it. He was indeed slightly inferior to that sword soldier, but he was still an expert. However, I could completely handle him. Then I looked toward the other 2 people. Bensuji was already lying in bed without any movement, and Kron had already reacted at this moment, immediately drawing his sword to join the battle. At this point, the assassin had become desperate. He used his speed advantage to quickly break through my defensive line. Then he flicked his hand, and another sharp blade flew from his sleeve toward me. The moment I saw the dagger, I immediately sensed danger and quickly bent down to block, but my chest was still cut. However, this pushed my body balance to its limit. What made me even more afraid was that there was actually movement at the entrance at this moment. Looking closely, that person was actually the elf captain. After seeing her, the killing intent in my heart became even stronger. If I didn't take her down first, I would probably die. At this moment, the assassin shouted, "You actually have guards!" Then he used all his hidden weapons. These hidden weapons had a very wide range. Part of them flew toward Kron. Another part flew toward me. I thought to myself this was bad. It seemed I would die here again tonight. But just then, I was stepped on by the elf captain. The elf captain's cloak blocked all the attacks, and her figure had already reached Kron's front, protecting his safety. I was shocked. I thought she was on the same side as the assassin, but she had come to protect us. However, the most important thing right now was to deal with the assassin. I jumped up and used the sword thrust technique. Although I only had a dagger in my hand, it was enough. The assassin's face was extremely panicked. He was so scared he didn't blink, having to see clearly the direction of my attack. With a clang, my attack was indeed seen clearly by him, and blocked. The assassin cursed under his breath, "Damn it." Then he turned around and fled without looking back. And I didn't pursue. I knew the principle of not chasing a desperate enemy. Kron stepped forward and said, "That assassin just now should have been targeting me." I responded, "I know." Kron's face showed slight surprise as he said, "How did you know?" I snorted coldly and said, "Who would send an assassin to kill me or Bensuji, these bottom-tier soldiers?" The elf captain praised, "Although you're just a squad leader, your insight is very strong." I looked at the blade in the elf's hand. She was making a drawing motion. Although we had just been allies, was she worried that if today's events spread, the situation would become troublesome? It seemed my guess was correct. She wanted to silence us. Seeing the scene, I also gripped the blade in my hand tightly. As long as she moved, I would make a big commotion out of this. At this moment, Kron said to the elf captain, "I don't want to see anyone else die. Do you understand?" Kron's eyes held immense authority, seeming to carry an undeniable tone. The elf captain respectfully bowed and said, "Then, as you wish." I was shocked. Someone Someone as formidable as the elf captain actually submitted to Kron. What kind of character was Kron exactly? Then Kron looked toward Bensuji on the bed. He seemed to be only paralyzed, still alive. After arranging everything properly, the next step was to clean up here. If word of the assassin's visit spread, the situation would become somewhat troublesome. Then I said to them, I have a rather crude but simple method. A moment later, a great fire directly burned down the entire camp. Everyone was frantically fighting the fire. Hurry or the fire will spread to the entire military camp, and I pretended to be a survivor, carrying Bensuji as I escaped. This way, the assassin's traces disappeared, which was safest for Kron. I looked toward the great fire nearby. Tomorrow should arrive normally. At the same time, in another part of the forest, the elf captain escorted Kron away from here, saying, if that squad leader hadn't bought time, you might already be dead. Did you change your mind because of him? Kron nodded and said, don't you think he's quite interesting? He's been avoiding certain things. It was precisely because of his contact with me that his thinking changed. And perhaps I've been influenced by you too, especially those eyes of yours. It won't be long before we meet again. Kron felt some anticipation in his heart. At the same time, in the dark space, a death god scythe stood there. But in just a moment, that scythe had already turned to dust, meaning he would no longer appear. Not far in front of me, the ferryman said softly, we will meet again. I snorted coldly and said, no matter how many times we meet, I'll keep you company to the end. After escaping silent death, I welcomed the dawn of the next day. Now, I could clearly sense ordinary movements, but I still couldn't sense the movements of elves. I needed to do more sensory training. I was somewhat thankful that I hadn't been too badly injured in yesterday's battle with the assassin. Otherwise, there would be no return date. At this moment, Bensuji said with disgust, why did you save me? His tone made me very displeased. I said, what's with your confrontational attitude? Then I spoke my true feelings. We're comrades, no other reason needed. This made Bensuji somewhat embarrassed. Why so sentimental all of a sudden? I had given him a hard time many times before. He really was a brainless guy. Then he called out to stop me, saying, are you returning to the squad now? I nodded and said, if you have nothing else, I'll go back now. He told me to wait, saying, going back now would be absolutely terrible. Your luck is too bad, because there are rumors that the entire position has been cursed. At the same time, Ragnar stared ahead with a fierce expression, and standing in front of him was Rem. These two seemed to be having a conflict. Rem said with a cheerful face, you little brat, do you want to fight me? However, this scene left the people nearby dumbfounded. If they started fighting, innocent bystanders might get caught up in it. At this moment, Ragnar had already been lifted into the air by Rem. With a crash, Rem heavily slammed Ragnar's body onto the tent. Ragnar immediately got up and quickly threw a punch at Rem's face. However, Rem's fist was faster, hitting Ragnar's face before Ragnar's punch could land. Rem decided to crack Ragnar's head open with his axe. Ragnar wasn't to be outdone either, immediately drawing the sword from his waist, preparing to fight to the death. I sighed deeply. Although I didn't know what the position's curse was, I felt these two were other people's curse. However, these two were also smart. Even when fighting, they did it in front of other people's tents, not damaging their own things. Then I told them to stop. Whenever I wasn't here, the entire squad seemed to be in chaos. Time passed, and 3 days later arrived. I had been back with the squad for the third day. Just then, I heard a sound and suddenly opened my eyes. Jackson was passing by me. He said, I tried to be as quiet as possible, but I still woke you up. I told him not to worry about it. I was about to get up and exercise anyway. Jackson said with some surprise, you've only been learning for a few days and your ears are already this sensitive. You must keep practicing. This will be very helpful for your future. Then he left. Soon this place would welcome winter, and there would be much less fighting on the battlefield. Thanks to this winter, I now had plenty of free time to start training. The current season was more suitable for intensive training than any other time. When I finished exercising and was preparing to return, a rock greeted me. Under this rock was Odin doing push-ups. He said, squad leader, are you coming back from morning practice? You're really diligent. With a rumble, he directly threw off the giant stone on his back. As Odin slowly stood up, his shadow had already covered me. He said to me, train your body well. At least you need to be able to withstand kicks from no accounts like Frogman. You're still too thin and weak. You need more training, at least to have a physique like mine. I said, I'll definitely work hard, but I thought I could never train to have his physique, not even in dreams. Just as Odin and I were chatting, fighting sounds came from the tent behind us. It turned out Rem couldn't stand Ragnar and started fighting with him. Today was clearly your shift, but you were lying here sleeping. You lazy bum. Ragnar didn't say much, but groggily reached for his sword. Then he stared angrily at Rem and said, if I don't kill you, I'm not Ragnar. Rem never feared fighting. He picked up his axe and charged forward. At this moment, Odin and I walked in saying, both of you stop. Why do you fight every day? Odin held up his token and began praying again. Violence is ignorance and cannot solve any problems. I hope God can reduce their violence. Rem pointed to Ragnar nearby and said, this kid deliberately wants to starve us to death. Then I ordered Ragnar to go on duty and asked him to handle lunch. Ragnar readily agreed. Rem handed his towel to Ragnar, saying, since you can cook, why didn't you go before? Ragnar slapped Rem's hand away and said, take your dirty hands away, they stink. For this, Rem specifically sniffed and said, there's no bad smell. It actually smells quite nice. I said to Rem, don't pick fights over every little dissatisfaction. Are you doing this because you're bored? Rem laughed. Didn't expect you to figure it out. Haven't been on the battlefield in a long time. My hands are getting itchy. Hearing his words, I told him to come out and spar with me one-on-one instead of troubling others. But after just a quarter hour, I was being beaten down by Rem. Rem smiled calmly and said, squad leader, why is your strength so weak? You're too fragile. Then he casually waved his hand and directly knocked my sword flying. I continuously used the beast's heart to maintain my composure, because only this way could I keep taking Rem's attacks. Then I used sensitive hearing to capture attack trajectories for defense, and finally used the sword thrust I learned through 100 deaths to deliver a killing blow to Rem. But unfortunately, no matter how I attacked, I could never never hit him. This made me curse, "You bastard are strong like a madman." With a crash, I was directly pressed heavily to the ground by Rem's single hand. Rem felt I seemed to have gotten considerably stronger recently without realizing it. He was quite looking forward to it now. But this anticipation didn't last long, because he discovered I only had those same few moves. He said, "I'm already tired of seeing sword thrust. Don't you have anything else?" Actually, I was also clear about what Rem was saying, but I really only knew these few moves. However, I was different from my previous self. Even if I failed thousands of times, I could still move forward. I told Rem to keep coming. This time, I would definitely defeat him. However, my strength was simply pathetic in Rem's eyes. But when he saw my eyes, he felt there was another meaning to them. The corner of his mouth slightly curved up. He didn't know why this eye was so captivating. Then Rem said, "Talk about defeating me after you can actually touch me, you boastful squad leader." Just as we were preparing to continue fighting, it started raining heavily. This forced us to stop the duel and prepare to go into the tent to wait for the rain to stop. At the same time, there were other people in the tent too. All squad members were resting here. Even the big-eyed boy came to the tent. With today's rain, his business was indeed much less. He shook the water off his head and said, "Weather like this could be called a curse?" After hearing about the curse, I remembered that Bensuji had also mentioned a curse to me before. If I remembered correctly, Bensuji had said the entire position was cursed. Anyway, recently there had been strange incidents one after another. The weather was also very odd, injured soldiers were increasing, and there had been fires. If this continued, morale might completely collapse. However, I felt the higher-ups definitely wouldn't want such rumors spreading in the camp. I guessed it would be dealt with soon. At this moment, the big-eyed boy finally asked curiously, "Why do you keep standing at the entrance?" I told him I was doing sensory training, and this weather was just right for me. This made Rem say displeasedly, "Just like Jackson, really unlucky." Jackson, however, thought this training method was very good. At this moment, Rem finally noticed something was wrong, saying, "You didn't teach the squad leader something, did you? Why are you so concerned about the squad leader?" Their argument made my ears buzz, and I could barely hear the rain outside. At this moment, Odin said, "If you're looking for training methods you can do in the tent, you could do many kinds of training while sitting." Ragnar also said, "It's been a while since I helped you check your sword-holding posture. Want me to take a look?" Hearing these two words, Rem looked at them both puzzledly, and said, "Looks like you two saw the same thing I did, just like me." All of them had seen my changes during this period. In this stormy military camp, several captains were meeting in a tent. "Before winter arrives, we need to send out a reconnaissance team one more time. Are there any soldiers who can fill the numbers?" The elf captain suggested, "How about squad 444? The captain said, "That's the small fry squad, isn't it? Their captain is a bit foolish. What if he holds us back?" But the elf captain said, "Maybe that squad leader can bring us unexpected surprises." I begged the captain to send squad 444. This is an elf's intuition. The next day, I was called in for a talk by the elf leader. When I learned I was being transferred to the reconnaissance team, I was actually somewhat dissatisfied because I preferred combat. But her order came down like a mountain, making it impossible for me to refuse. After returning, the big-eyed boy thought I had caught the squadron leader's attention. Otherwise, why would she specifically pick me to be a scout? I suspected it might be because of Kron's departure. This inscrutable elf captain wouldn't turn around and try to kill me, would she? However, orders were hard to disobey, and I had to go even if I didn't want to. At this moment, Rem took out his axe and said, "If you don't want to go, you just need to say one word." I said, "Forget it. Don't cause me any more trouble. If you do this, it will only create bigger problems." At this time, Odin started praying again. "I hope the great god won't make things difficult for the squad leader. Please don't take the frail squad leader away." At this moment, Ragnar suddenly stood up. He indicated that he could replace the squad leader for reconnaissance. As a result, everyone started refuting him. "Others can go, but you absolutely cannot. You're such a direction-blind person. Don't you have any self-awareness?" At this time, Jackson behind me calmly said, "I heard the reconnaissance area is the tall grass prairie. When you hear sounds different from usual in the grass, you need to concentrate, because perceiving anomalies is the foundation for responding to enemy sneak attacks." Rem said dissatisfiedly, "Don't teach the squad leader all sorts of random things. It will make him develop bad habits." I sighed deeply. If I went now, there'd be no one in the team to stop them from arguing. But in my opinion, I was indeed the most suitable candidate. After I joined the team, because my strength wasn't strong, I was ordered around and had no clear position. Later I found something of value I could do. That was taking on the position of squad leader of the small fry squad that everyone avoided. I said to them, "That's enough. If you keep fighting, even the tent will be destroyed by you." Rem didn't know whether I was ignorant or brave, rushing to intervene in that scene just now. Jackson said, "Rem, thank the squad leader properly, otherwise I would have pierced your heart long ago." Rem wasn't afraid of Jackson's intimidation and said, "Just now, if it weren't for the squad leader stopping me, I would have chopped off your head long ago." Hearing their conversation, I was certain I should go to the reconnaissance team even more, because these guys were really too powerful. It didn't matter whether I was in the team or not, but they absolutely couldn't be missing. So I didn't hesitate anymore and went directly to the reconnaissance team. The reconnaissance team's mission was to investigate the frontmost situation, so it was a good opportunity to train perception while being vigilant against enemies. Seeing me training, the newly appointed reconnaissance squad leader Andrew Gardno said dissatisfiedly, "What exactly are you doing? Although your position is also squad leader, I'm the captain of the reconnaissance team. If you want to protest, you'll have to beat me with your strength." strength. The person behind echoed, how could he possibly dare to fight you? I bet this guy doesn't even know how to hold a sword. The reconnaissance team captain laughed, you're nothing but trash, and then he didn't bother with me anymore. Then he told everyone to be alert, and when they saw the enemy, they must blow off all their heads. This captain was really noisy. Didn't he know what reconnaissance meant? He had no idea about the reconnaissance team's responsibilities. At this time, someone discovered footprints on the ground. Everyone immediately became tense. These should be wildebeest footprints. The captain laughed. Today we'll follow these footprints and we'll definitely have barbecue tonight. I was somewhat speechless. Had the captain lost his mind? Looking at the footprints, there were at least 20 wildebeest. With so few of us, we still wanted to catch them. At this time, the person beside me said dissatisfiedly, these don't seem like wildebeest footprints. These are gazelle footprints. He looked at me awkwardly and said, don't you also think this captain is being ridiculous? He was Henry, a hunter from the village. He didn't like this captain much, so he became familiar with me. Along the way, Henry told me a lot of common knowledge. When night came, the captain cursed loudly, searched all day and didn't find a single sheep. What a waste of time. He was already scratching his head in frustration, thinking that no matter what, he had to bring back some results. The next day, our group finally arrived at the final destination. Looking around, there were only mountains and grass. This was the tall grass prairie. We needed to cross this tall grass prairie and find the enemy Asben's reconnaissance team, then capture several of them alive as prisoners and earn merit. Henry hesitantly said, are we really going in? Our mission this time is to survey the terrain. Although I didn't want to go in either. This was the captain's order, and we had no choice. Then our group went deeper inside. Crossing such a large tall grass prairie wasn't an easy task. Actually, I thought they would give up soon, which was why I followed along. I didn't expect him to have no complaints at all. After walking around, Henry felt something was wrong because he hadn't found any animal droppings. This prairie was like a huge granary. It was impossible for there to be no animal droppings. Just then, I heard the heavy sound of a wild beast's claws landing. This made my heart immediately tense. A wild leopard suddenly ran out from the grass nearby and was rapidly fleeing. In that split second, I made eye contact with that wild leopard. I immediately came to the captain's front and told him to get down quickly because I sensed an ambush around us. Sure enough, just as I finished speaking, two teammates had their heads blown off by arrows. The captain said, this is bad. I didn't expect there to be enemy troops here. Could these guys have ambushed here earlier than us, waiting for us to fall into the trap together? The captain ordered everyone to flee immediately. If we got surrounded, it would be troublesome. But while running, the captain was actually captured by others. I heard a squelching sound, the sound of a blade piercing flesh entering my ears. They seemed to have been killed. Now only 3 people remained, already surrounded by dozens of people. I used the perception that Jackson taught me to continuously dodge arrows. But unfortunately, I was now among thousands. No matter how powerful the perception, it absolutely couldn't dodge a sure hit attack. I saw dozens of arrows coming at me from behind. With a squelching sound, those arrows directly pierced through my chest, and my reincarnation for today ended here. When I opened my eyes again, I told the captain not to go inside and to observe the terrain from the perimeter first. But he didn't listen to me at all, saying if I talked nonsense again, he would kill me. So I was surrounded by enemy troops once again. This time I chose a different route, but I still couldn't escape the fate of being killed, so I restarted the loop. Although I was killed again, it didn't matter. I could just start over. This time when fleeing east, I was discovered by a unit of over 20 people and died under their barrage of arrows. A new round of loops started again. After avoiding the unit and fleeing north, I was surrounded and killed by a spear unit. But in this round of loop, I made a new discovery. In this tall grass prairie, as long as I entered, I never came out alive. I suspected they were hiding something. This time I was stabbed to death again, which made me more certain that there was some unspeakable secret inside. In the new round of LOP, the squad leader said excitedly, we just need to cross this prairie, find Asben's reconnaissance team, and capture a few live prisoners to earn merit. But he didn't know I had already tried dozens of times, and not once did I come out alive. So those Asben guys must be hiding some unknown secret. I had to figure it out. If I gave up now, I might not die, but instead welcome the arrival of a new day tomorrow. But this wasn't what I wanted. I wasn't someone who would retreat when seeing a wall. The captain said to me dissatisfiedly, what are you dawdling about? The big guy next to me also came to dissuade me. I know you don't like him, but enough is enough. He has his difficulties too, but I didn't give him a good face and said, don't you get tired of praising him to the skies every day? The man was very angry and even thought his ears had heard wrong. I pushed that person away and indicated that I wouldn't be manipulated by them anymore. The captain was somewhat nervous and could only use his authority to pressure me, saying, are you trying to disobey orders? I had no intention of resisting military orders, and I didn't dare to, but taking a captain's position shouldn't be a problem, right? I wanted all the team members here to demonstrate their abilities and survive together. The captain was extremely angry and said, this is really too contemptuous. Then the captain drew his sword and said, if you can beat me, then everything will be up to you. When I saw the captain's sword-holding posture, I also showed a serious expression. He should be the type who had learned but wasn't proficient, probably some nobleman. But if he was a nobleman, he wouldn't need to be so eager to achieve merit, would he? Could he be a fallen nobleman? The captain said, looking at your trash-like strength and mismatched position, you must be a waste who never trains. The captain felt he was different from others. He had a mission that must be completed. I felt he was a bit long-winded. I beckoned to him and said, come on, I can beat you with just my bare hands. My words directly enraged the captain, and he charged at me with his sword. If it were before, the battle between him and me might have been a hard fight. But he was underestimating me. As long as he underestimated me, he would definitely show an opening, and I just needed to break through his defense in that instant. Soon, his sword technique came. I blocked it in advance with my arm. The next moment, the classic famous scene came. I directly caught his blade with my bare hands. My right fist swung out fiercely, directly hitting his trachea. This punch of mine almost made the captain vomit up his overnight meal. In front of me, the captain couldn't even withstand a single move and fell to the ground. The team members were all stunned, not expecting I could have such strength. They only knew I was the lowest level soldier. I said, from now on, the reconnaissance team will be commanded by me. Is there anyone who's not convinced? Everyone was silent, making no response. Even that arrogant captain just slowly lowered his head. So I successfully became the captain of the reconnaissance team. Soon our group once again walked into the dense forest. Everyone was puzzled about why I wanted to do this. At this time, I asked Henri, what is your dream? Henri said somewhat confused, why are you asking me this? I don't have dreams now. I used to have a dream, hoping to live together with the flower shop proprietress. I sighed and said, if you want to live, you have to survive from here first. Then I asked another person and learned he already had a lover and child. I told him to work hard and stay alive. Then I also inquired about the dreams of the other two. One wanted to earn money to open a shop, and one wanted to return to his hometown to live a peaceful life. Finally, I also asked Andrew. He wanted to fulfill his mother's last words, because he had to revive the Garneau family. This was his mission. I said, you all have dreams and need to leave here first to realize them. Next, you must follow my arrangements. We will return alive and definitely realize our dreams. I appeared particularly brilliant in the sunlight, and everyone was shocked by this scene. From now on, all squad members must actively engage the enemy. There was no better motivation than the desire for life. Previously, I had tried to break through after enemy troops appeared, but I was wrong. There was no way to escape. I pointed forward and ordered Henri to aim for heads and height in the direction of my finger. Although he had some doubts, these doubts were suppressed by my gaze. After I gave him the order, he shot an arrow directly into the air in the direction I indicated. This arrow was very accurate, directly hitting the enemy's skull. This scared several of them badly, not expecting there really were enemy troops ambushed here. I shouted loudly to Andrew behind me, follow my pace closely and charge up to kill. So Andrew followed behind me with a fierce expression. Soon, there were 3 shadowy figures ahead of us, but I didn't stop at all and directly charged up to give him a sword strike. Through these loops, I understood one principle. If you want to gain the upper hand in battle, you must strike first. These 2 soldiers couldn't react in time. All their attention was on me, completely not noticing that Andrew behind them had already assassinated them. At the same time, behind Andrew, there was also an enemy soldier aiming at his heart. Fortunately, another member of the squad also arrived in time and eliminated that soldier. Their battle record was outstanding. In the blink of an eye, they directly took 2 lives. For a moment, the enemy soldiers suddenly became extremely panicked and immediately called for reinforcements. But at this time, we wouldn't be afraid because all our team members had assembled and were listening to orders. What followed was a crushing massacre. On the tall grass prairie, the enemy also found it difficult to control our position. The reason we were discovered by them initially was because of that black leopard. The enemy accidentally discovered us because of this leopard. So this time when the enemy caught it, they became very panicked after being ambushed by us. This was how we achieved our victorious battle record. After killing all the enemies, I told them to immediately change locations. We couldn't stay here long. Unknown to me, behind me, a leopard was staring at me. We lost 1 teammate in the battle just now. I couldn't save everyone, but this was the time when I saved the most lives. Unknown to us, after we left, someone in the distance behind us was watching us. 10 minutes later, I still led the remaining people to begin ambushing the soldiers here. Because I had reincarnated dozens of times, I clearly knew the terrain here. If we continued forward, we would die at the hands of the enemy's crossbow unit, so we had to avoid them. Besides that, we also had to prioritize eliminating a group of spear unit soldiers, so that subsequent actions would be convenient. At this time, Andrew exerted all his strength and assassinated another enemy soldier. This made his guards somewhat frightened after seeing it. Andrew was really fighting too hard. When it got dark, they wouldn't be able to find the way, so he decided to hurry and escape before sunset. But I decided to advance, but that guard said dissatisfiedly, "Inside is closer to enemy territory." I said, "Shut up. It's best to talk less nonsense and hurry up and follow me." However, the next scene directly shocked all the members in the team. Andrew's subordinate pointed his sword at my throat and said, "Squad leader, do you have some other plan or conspiracy? I don't want to accompany you to die. Even if I kill you here, I want to find a way to live." My eyes were extremely cold, and I said, "You should know that you definitely can't make it back in time now, right? We've already caused a big commotion on the prairie. If we go back now, the road is probably already blocked with enemy troops." Then I placed my hand on the guard's hand and made him put down his sword. I said before that I also want to live, so I won't harm you. This moved the former captain somewhat. He originally thought I must be an incompetent piece of trash, just like his deceased father who gave up everything and squandered the family fortune. But when Andrew saw my performance, he felt the truth was quite the opposite. In his mind, he remembered what his mother said to him before she died. She hoped her son would be an unyielding hero who could guide everyone. And when he saw me, he actually wanted very much to become the leadership figure I had just displayed. The next moment, he no longer hesitated and said loudly, "I believe you, squad leader." Andrew and I made eye contact for 3 seconds, then I nodded heavily to him. Andrew's guard thought he was crazy and said, "Why believe a captain of a small fry squad?" But what he got was Andrew scolding, "Shut up. Team members should follow the captain's orders." Seeing Andrew say this, he was too embarrassed to say anything more and could only follow behind the team. I crouched down and said to them, "Please curl up your bodies and quietly follow me." The people behind were also very obedient, all crouching down and crawling forward. My first plan was to strike first, then escape, avoiding being surrounded by enemy troops. Soon our group heard the sound of footsteps. This was my second plan. After repeated dozens of attempts, I found the only place where we could hide from them. Everyone was scared by this scene. As long as they made even the slightest noise, they would die here, because they were surrounded by dense crowds of soldiers. So far, everything was within my plan. Soon the patrolling soldiers left, leaving only our group, but I told them not to act and to wait until dark. I kept leading them deeper inside. After a day, they finally despaired. Because we had arrived at their camp. There must be secrets here that the Asban army couldn't let spread outside. That's why they killed everyone who entered the prairie. If there was something more important than capturing us here, then we would definitely have a way to escape. Soon I thought of an idea, which was to set fire in the enemy camp. The guard behind said, "Madman, this is enemy heartland. We might be annihilated." I asked what his name was. The guard said confusedly, "You can call me Mag." I said, "I asked your name because I respect you. Then, I don't accept insubordination." Mag wanted to say something more, but Andrew stopped him. "Shut up, Mag. Just believe him." Then Andrew was the first to charge up with me. Actually, even if Andrew didn't say it, Mag clearly understood the current situation. There was no moonlight now, and they couldn't find the way. Now they could only trust the squad leader's judgment. At the same time, I charged forward and directly cut open the tent with my sword. Mag was shocked. This madman actually directly slashed open the tent and walked in. What amazed him was that this tent was empty inside. Mag was very strange about why I knew it was empty inside. During the entire period, we were rampaging through the enemy camp's interior, but no matter how we walked, we never encountered any enemy. Mag had to admire me. Although he didn't know what method I used, he felt I was very capable. Soon we came to the back of a tent. I raised one hand to signal them to stop. I had already infiltrated this place dozens of times before. When I first saw the banner above, I chose to touch it. Then in just a few seconds, I was assassinated by soldiers. So I deduced that what the Asban army was hiding on the prairie was that banner. And protecting that banner was their primary goal. Mag said in surprise, "Why would a mere squad leader like you know these things?" Then, as if remembering something, he recalled what the elf captain had said before. These things should be what she told him. When the Asban army focused their energy on protecting the banner, that would be the moment for us to prepare to escape. Seeing me so calm and composed, Mag guessed I might have received a secret mission from the military. I told them the only way to escape here was to destroy that banner. Next, I prepared to divide into two groups. The first group would act as bait to lure out enemy soldiers, and the other group would be responsible for setting fires. Mag said, "I think I'm more suitable to be this bait." Hearing this, I glanced at him lightly. Hadn't he always been dissatisfied with my orders? How did he suddenly start cooperating with me? But this saved me a lot of worry. Actually, I had led this team to this place many times before, but this time was the best situation, and the most people came. So far, today was the best, and all the premonitions were very good. At this moment, a soldier in the enemy camp was heavily hit by a stone. They immediately realized there were enemy intruders here. Soon, Mag's actions attracted dozens of soldiers to surround and attack him. At the same time, on the other side, I also chose to make my move. I didn't hesitate to grab a nearby fire torch. Just then, I felt endless killing intent. I saw a tall man above me raising his long sword to strike down. With a clang, that long sword directly cut off the fire bucket in my hand. I was greatly alarmed. How did this person approach behind me without any sound? I immediately stood up and looked toward the man's direction. I saw this person's aura was extremely dangerous. So far, I had never seen such an enemy. I felt something was wrong in my heart. It seemed I had encountered a formidable opponent today. The man's face was extremely ugly, and he said, "What are you trash doing here?" However, his reaction was always a beat too slow. It was too late for him to come out and stop me now. I saw a tent on our side burst into raging flames. This immediately made the enemy troops panic. At the same time, Andrew coordinated with another companion to carry two large wine barrels, preparing to pour them on the fire. Seeing this, the man ordered, "Don't worry about the intruders first. Put out the fire first." This was the plan I arranged. Mag acted as bait to lure out most of the soldiers, then Andrew ignited the camp, and I attracted the attention of the remaining enemies. From the beginning, I wasn't the one who was supposed to set the fire. At this time, my foot stomped heavily. If not now, when else would I kill him? I immediately got into position and used the surrounding environment to hide my killing intent. Now the man was completely open, waiting for me to stab through. His whole body was full of openings. Just when my sword edge was only 3 centimeters away from the man's head suddenly turned around. This fatal sword was actually dodged by him. This completely stunned me. I actually failed with that confident strike just now. Not only that, in that instant, the man was actually able to hit my waist. That sword just now was the most perfect sword I had ever thrust in my life. I slowly turned my head to look at the man. It seemed this person's strength was completely not on the same level as mine. The man contemptuously cursed, "You trash actually tried to assassinate me just now." He walked toward me, but I no longer had confidence to continue fighting. I knew I couldn't beat him. Recalling today's countless loops, I had finally made it this far with great difficulty. If I died here, I would really be unwilling. This made me feel that this man in front of me was truly someone who could be called a wall. Compared to the previous soldier and that assassin, it was like heaven and earth. Since my wound was now on my waist, if I fought him head on, I would definitely die. I swayed and stood up. If I died, everything would have to start over. But I wasn't afraid of starting over. Even if I started over 10,000 times, I wouldn't get tired of it. Then he directly launched an attack at me, and I also prepared my stance to meet the attack. I raised the sword in my hands with both hands. I would definitely climb over this wall. The moment the two sharp blades collided, they produced a harsh scraping sound. I struck down with another sword, which was actually blocked hard by the opponent. This shocked me. I didn't expect his reaction speed to be so fast. When I came to my senses, the opponent was already about to cut through my body. But fortunately, my speed was agile enough. I dodged to the side and escaped disaster. What followed were successive attacks. Now I was beaten by him with no ability to fight back. The opponent's reaction was very fast. I had almost no chance to counterattack. After fighting several more rounds, I felt the gap between us was getting bigger and bigger. Taking advantage of this opening, I quickly drew the hidden weapon from my waist and threw it over. What I didn't expect was that he blocked it with just the back of his hand. Then he thrust a sword at me. Just then, someone shouted loudly, "Hurry and put out the fire! The fire is getting bigger!" It was precisely this voice that distracted him, and that attack didn't hit me. Looking back, the banner behind was almost burned to ashes. The sorcerer behind cursed at him. "Captain, don't you know what you should be doing now?" The man opposite looked at me. He didn't expect such a weak guy to be so troublesome, and he saw unyielding spirit in my eyes. For a moment, he couldn't quickly resolve the battle. Then he left a harsh word, "We have a long future ahead. Let's see about this." After saying this, he calmly left this place. This made me somewhat surprised. He just left like that? Wasn't he my wall? I gripped the knife in my hand tightly. Actually, I still wanted to continue fighting with him in my heart, because only by fighting with such masters could I improve my strength. At this time, Andrew's voice came from behind. "Squad leader, let's take advantage of now and leave quickly. If we don't go now, none of us will be able to leave." I nodded. Now indeed wasn't the time to be attached to battle. I had to bring everyone back. But I would remember that figure. At some time in the future, I would definitely defeat him. Then I shouted loudly to all my companions behind, "Retreat immediately. Don't be attached to battle." Right now, taking advantage of their busy firefighting was our best opportunity to escape. During the escape, I saw that Henry's stamina seemed to be almost exhausted. At the same time, 4 or 5 soldiers came chasing after him from behind. We couldn't let them easily kill the companions we had worked so hard to bring out. Andrew and I together killed the opponents. Then I retreated to the back to provide cover and let them run up the mountain. As we ran, I felt my eyes were a bit dazzled. It seemed we were welcoming a new dawn. Even so, we didn't dare slack off and ran frantically toward our own camp. When we returned to the military camp, we were already exhausted with weak legs and dizzy heads. Even I was no exception. But I felt that today's version of myself seemed to have been sublimated. At the same time, at the enemy's headquarters, their banner had already been burned, so this matter couldn't be helped. They could only spend time preparing again. But the captain didn't expect that the famous Grey Dog unit actually couldn't stop those little brats. They had previously arranged elite troops to guard the tall grass prairie. The so-called Grey Dog unit was an independent squadron with independent combat rights in the Asban army. The unit's name came from the gray-haired Grey Dogs of the Asban Principality. Grey Dogs were naturally stubborn and famous for this. Anyone they set their sights on had never escaped. He asked the man behind him, "Was your opponent strong today?" Mickey said indifferently, "If there hadn't been a fire, I could have taken his life on the spot. If I encounter him again next time, he won't have today's good luck." After returning to the military camp, I still couldn't forget that battle. If possible, I still wanted to fight with him. Next time we fight, I will definitely kill him. Our thoughts at this moment were surprisingly consistent. After I completed the mission, I went to report everything that had happened. From my report, the elf captain judged that this was an almost impossible task to complete, but she didn't expect that I had actually completed it. After leaving the tent, I saw several people who had teamed up with me, and they were very grateful for my help this time. I waved my hand to indicate it was nothing, saying such a small matter was hardly worth mentioning. The reason I didn't accept their apology was because I felt I hadn't done well enough. Although I saved 4 of them, I still lost 2 comrades in the end. Since I had been repeating today continuously, I could already see the scenery beyond the limits. So now I shouldn't be struggling in place, but should keep transcending the cycle and surpassing today's version of myself. Therefore, I had to become even stronger. Just then, shouting appeared ahead of me. Looking closely, it turned out that Rem and Ragnar were fighting again. Rem seemed very excited when fighting with Ragnar. His whole expression was one I'd never seen before. Ragnar was the same. His expression was unusually serious too. When I had sparred with them before, I had never seen them show such expressions. The mustachioed man beside said in horror, "Are these still human? They're simply monsters." Probably only these two had the combat power to spar with each other every day without holding back. After watching their battle, I couldn't help but grip my sword hilt. I was very envious. So I set a goal, to make them show such expressions in front of me too. With a swoosh, Rem's axe fell again, and the air rang with the loud sound of clashing blades. Sharp-eyed Ragnar saw me first and said, "Didn't expect you to come back, squad leader." Rem said, "If you're back, then come back openly. Why are you hiding there watching us fight?" After I returned, Rem told the others to leave quickly, as he didn't want to fight anymore. When I came back, I immediately started reviewing Rem's battle with Ragnar, but Rem seemed to have no interest in talking to me at all. Having no choice, I went to ask Ragnar, "How did you respond to Rem's attacks just now?" But Ragnar was the same as Rem, completely unwilling to talk to me. No matter how fanatical a training enthusiast is, once the body is injured, it must rest properly. After dinner in the evening, I was preparing to train again, and Rem and Ragnar couldn't understand me. If the squad leader continued training in this way, he might die. Time flashed by, and it was the next morning. Ragnar slept comfortably until the next morning before getting up. Turning his head, Ragnar discovered that the squad leader was actually training despite his injuries. He stretched comfortably, thinking that such training was basically futile. Then he ran to the back of the tent to watched me practice. After watching for a while, Ragnar felt it was somewhat painful to watch. Every one of my moves revealed a lack of basic skills. So even though I struggled day and night, the training remained fruitless. But when he saw my eyes, he felt them filled with hope. So Ragnar felt conflicted, because how could an ordinary little swordsman have such powerful hope in his eyes? Finally, he couldn't help but come out and ask me why I insisted on training every day. However, I simply told him that I wanted to become stronger and more powerful. Ragnar continued asking, "If you become stronger, what other goals do you have?" I said my goal has always been the same from beginning to end, to become a knight. I want to walk the path of knighthood. Even if this path means my destruction, I'm willing to accept it. Then Ragnar, as if he had made a decision, came behind me. Ragnar said solemnly, "Do you want to learn swordsmanship, squad leader?" This made me very happy. He was finally going to teach me swordsmanship. I was certainly willing to learn swordsmanship from Ragnar, although I didn't know his true strength. Every time he fought with Rem, he held his ground for a long time. After seeing my eyes, Ragnar felt things were getting more interesting. Ragnar held up 2 fingers and said, "If you want to learn swordsmanship from me, first you must abandon the beast's heart and the sword thrust. Everything else must be thrown away too." This shocked me. Did I have to throw away the mercenary sword techniques too? Ragnar felt I had too many unnecessary movements, and if I didn't abandon them, they might cost me my life. Ragnar asked, "Do you need to learn new techniques, or do you want to be content with the status quo?" However, I didn't think too much about it, and directly chose to relearn swordsmanship. This stunned Ragnar, who said, "Don't you want to consider it at all?" I said, "Hurry up and teach me, don't stand there in a daze." Ragnar was secretly surprised, thinking, this guy is indeed somewhat unreasonable. Later, Ragnar took me to get a long sword. He really taught me from the basics. First, the posture of holding the sword with both hands, and the feeling of gripping the sword. He said, "The sword in your hand doesn't become powerful by gripping it tightly. You must use the wrist movement to flexibly combine the sword with yourself." Ragnar taught me for an afternoon, and I finally understood one thing. He wasn't a good teacher, because every time he got to the key points, he would speak vaguely. Then he could only use actual combat to teach me how to quickly execute sword techniques in battle, because this was the best and fastest way to improve swordsmanship. Ragnar's strength was indeed formidable. His casual sword made my wrist tremble, and I almost couldn't hold the sword. I asked him, "What happened? That sword of yours just now almost made me unable to hold my sword." My whole arm felt like it was paralyzed in an instant. Ragnar raised his arm to demonstrate for me. He said, "If your movements are too stiff, you'll be even less able to hold the sword. It's essentially like a tree branch or a pillar, something like that." I said somewhat speechlessly, "What you're saying is so bad I can't understand it. And what does that analogy even mean?" Just like that, I began training continuously with Ragnar. Every time I fell, I would get up and train again, until I was knocked down by Ragnar once more. Ragnar was somewhat surprised in his heart. He thought I wasn't this terrible. But when we actually fought, he discovered I hadn't even mastered the most basic fundamentals. If the squad leader was like this now, even if he were a divine general, he couldn't teach the squad leader swordsmanship. But I had no intention of giving up. I said, "Stop dazing and hurry up and continue practicing with me." Just then, Rem walked over and told me to quickly put on my clothes and prepare for battle. But I hadn't heard any notice about battle. It turned out to be a temporary order. Scouts had discovered enemy forces continuously approaching ahead. Now everyone in our squad was ready, except for me and Ragnar, who weren't equipped. The elf captain had even assembled several thousand soldiers to prepare for battle. Soon our squad of 6 arrived here, and I wanted to see who exactly wanted to fight us. Ragnar felt he had made a wrong decision today. Today he taught the squad leader to abandon his previous sword techniques, but today they encountered battle. The squad leader might die because of this. I could see a flag standing ahead of us. Looking carefully, there were 6 such flags in total in that place, and this was the wizard. These 6 flags would be their most advantageous weapon. Gradually, a mass of white mist slowly drifted over from the wizard's direction. The elf captain was somewhat surprised. Could this be sorcery? Soon this smoke enveloped everyone. Even though they were very close to each other, they couldn't see each other's figures. Just then, I seemed to sense something flying past me. At the same time, more and more people heard these sounds. I said, "This is bad. These sounds are arrows. Everyone quickly raise your shields to defend." The next moment, the enemy's overwhelming flying arrows shot over. For a moment, our side suffered heavy casualties. The elf captain never expected the enemy would use sorcery as a strategy. She immediately realized she had been tricked and told everyone to retreat quickly. The wizard said, "It's too late to retreat now. All of you will die in this smoke." And this smoke was the mist of destruction created by one of the flags. And there was an old acquaintance here too. When I burned the flag before, it had made him very angry. If we could face off this time, it would definitely be a life and death battle. At this moment on the battlefield, the enemy's sorcery was routing us completely, but I had already found a way to break the situation. So I charged directly into the smoke. Ragnar was startled and said, "Charging in recklessly like this is just throwing your life away." However, I completely ignored Ragnar's words. A spear thrust toward me, but I easily dodged it. I had already looped through today over 100 times. I knew the trajectory of all the arrows. Through so many loops, Ragnar had taught me many techniques, and now it was up to me. The next moment, I faced an enemy soldier. After his spear thrust out, my sword had already pierced into his neck. Then, I used the sword techniques I practiced daily to slash his body apart. At this time, I threw a dagger from my chest. I roughly knew the enemy's direction. All of this was already imprinted in my mind. With a thud, I threw my dagger hard, hitting an enemy soldier right in the chest. This made their expressions somewhat unsettled. After I attacked, my figure left the original spot. When I appeared again, I had severed an enemy soldier's leg. The enemy across from me was frightened by his comrades' screams and seemed somewhat panicked for a moment. Ragnar had told me me in previous loops, remember the coordination between eyes, feet, and hands. First, use your eyes to see and make predictions. Then move your feet to quickly approach the enemy. And finally use your hands to thrust the sword into the enemy soldier's chest. I laughed wildly. I felt this battle was somewhat different. Completely different from before I practiced the basics. As I kept killing, I reached the enemy's rear. The enemy captain smiled coldly and said, "You've fallen into the encirclement. Do you think you can still get out alive?" Little did he know this was exactly what I wanted. Only death could make me stronger. They all thought I was crazy, because only a madman would say such things. Then without hesitation, they killed me with a barrage of arrows. After this death, I came to the dark space again. This time the ferryman also appeared. She thought I had gone crazy, actually dying nearly 300 times in a single day. Opening my eyes again, I was back to this morning. I didn't expect the ferryman to appear this time just to call me crazy. At this time, Rem stood in front of me, reminding me of when Rem mentioned sorcery during the battle in the mist. I still remembered the enemy formation at that time. I discovered their formation had no tactical value. It seemed just like in the tall grass prairie, they were simply guarding the flags. Then I asked Rem, "Do you know what sorcery is?" Rem asked curiously, "When did you become interested in sorcery? I never heard you mention it before." I've learned about magic before, but I haven't heard of sorcery. Magic seems more common. So-called sorcery requires a medium, and the medium itself is a crucial thing. Without a medium, sorcery cannot be established. After listening to Rem's explanation, I should have understood. The thick fog was created by the enemy using sorcery, and the medium for that sorcery was the flags. So as long as I destroyed them, the fog would dissipate. The reason Rem understood sorcery was because sorcery originated in the West, and Rem happened to be born in the Western frontier. Rem had once been fortunate enough to witness a grand scene. Sorcerers were very rare, and most of the sorcerers circulating on the continent were frauds. After roughly understanding sorcery, I prepared to go train, and next, I would definitely break the enemy's sorcery. Today was the same. I found Ragnar again to learn swordsmanship. He asked me if I had heard of the 5 great sword techniques. 500 years ago, a genius appeared on the continent. Born in a small village, at a young age he killed 12 bandits who attacked the village using only a fire poker. He lost his parents early, and a noble who heard these rumors decided to take him in as an adopted son. That genius had once appeared under the name Leon Nishanak, but even though he was gifted, he was also cursed. When he was 10 years old, his body began to gradually weaken, and by 20, Leon Nishanak was completely paralyzed. But he organized 5 major categories of swordsmanship in the way of the sword. These 5 great sword techniques were the upright and exact blade, the heavy and powerful blade, the bewitched blade, the swift blade, and the gentle and flowing blade. So this was what Ragnar called the 5 great sword techniques. After Leon wrote a new chapter in the history of swordsmanship, the Oliniak family used this as an opportunity to become the most prestigious family in the empire. And this school of swordsmanship was passed down through generations, now becoming orthodox. So current swordsmanship was mainly divided into Northern Heavy Sword, Central Straight Sword and Soft Sword, Western Quick Sword, Southern Phantom Sword, and Eastern Strange Sword. Ragnar used the Northern Heavy Sword and created his own sword technique called Focus on One Point. Forget everything around you and focus only on your own sword and the enemy's sword. Then Ragnar got into position to demonstrate this sword technique. The next second, Ragnar's sword attacked me. His sword wasn't very fast, but it cut a gash on my neck. If Ragnar's blade had shifted 5 centimeters to the left, my major artery would have been severed. Ragnar asked expectantly, "Did you feel the focus on one point I mentioned earlier?" At this time, Rem appeared. He scolded Ragnar. "Are you trying to kill the squad leader?" Ragnar said, "I'm helping the squad leader train. It's none of your business." The two of them started arguing again. I felt neither of their teaching methods were very good. I turned and told them both to stop arguing, as it seemed someone was calling us to assemble. As we were about to assemble, Ragnar told me to carefully feel the state of nerve tension when near death. As long as I successfully entered the state of focusing on one point, the surrounding vision would become blurred, and my perception would only notice the sword in the enemy's hand and my sword. Then I began fighting continuously, experiencing countless deaths, but each death still didn't let me touch the state Ragnar described. It wasn't until the 260th loop that there was a breakthrough. I stared deadly at the flag in the distance. After dying over 200 times, I finally found the true location of the medium. If I could sever the flag this time, the mist would disappear. As the enemy sorcerer raised his hand, quite a bit of mist emerged from their side. I was somewhat used to this scene, and immediately crouched down, telling them to raise their shields to prepare for the incoming arrows. At this time, the soldiers seemed to have found their support and completely followed my orders. As the enemy's arrow rain fell, we had already prepared our shields to block it. I cursed loudly, "Damn sorcerer." Then I told Rem to charge up with me. Rem said with great surprise, "Are you crazy, squad leader? How dare you charge in recklessly like this?" I told Rem to clear the way for me because I wanted to conserve my strength, in case I had no energy left when I reached the flag. After charging with Rem, I seemed much more relaxed. Rem could kill a soldier with one axe blow. At this time, Rem grabbed a soldier by the collar and interrogated him. "Speak up. Who exactly created the sorcery?" That soldier didn't answer his question at all, so he killed him with one axe blow. I completely ignored the screams behind me. After all, I had been hearing these screams for over a year. Now the most important thing was to approach the innermost flag. The next moment, the power in my hand was fully charged. As long as I cut down the flag, the mist would disappear. I swayed forward and chopped my long blade down on the pole. It was time for this mist to end. However, just at this moment, a sword blocked my attack. After our two figures made contact, we immediately separated without any extra movements. The opponent's appearance surprised me, From that sword strike just now, I could tell the opponent was very strong. The man slowly said, "It seems heaven still has eyes. It actually let us meet again. For so many days, he had been wanting to take my life. He was the captain from the tall grass prairie, but I had already experienced over a year in the loops, and I had long forgotten his appearance. So I asked, 'Who are you? Do we know each other?' His expression froze as he said, 'You bastard. Did you forget me so quickly? It's only been a few days. You shouldn't have forgotten me.' But I really couldn't remember who he was, so he decided to use his sword to make me remember. As soon as he finished speaking, his body quickly approached me. I stared hard. This guy's strength was indeed not to be underestimated. After I concentrated fully to avoid his attack, I also began my counterattack. I saw my feet stomp heavily on the ground. I once again used the sword thrust I hadn't used in a long time. He was secretly surprised. How could this man make such great progress in just a few days? The me before him was no longer on the same level as the me he knew. Actually, he had already sensed that my strike just now was intended to restrain him with my strongest move. While he was dazed, my attack quietly came again. In the previous sword fight, I sensed he was using straight sword techniques, with extremely solid fundamentals, and he skillfully employed fluid sword techniques. This type of sword technique could resist defensive attacks. I deflected his attack with one sword, concentrating all my energy on what was before me, maintaining this balance that would be broken if I lost focus for even an instant. Then I had to pour everything I possessed into it. When our two swords clashed together again, I discovered that the colors in my pupils had only two types. The first was the blue-white sword body. The second was gray. Everything around had turned gray. It was as if only our two swords remained in my eyes. This time he was truly angry. He didn't expect even a small fry to take him so long. The next moment, he directly knocked the sword from my hand. This made me feel bad. If the balance was broken, only death awaited me. With a thud, just as I had guessed, his sword pierced directly into my heart. Although I was about to die, I felt extremely pleased in my heart. Only by fighting such people could I improve my strength. Only then did I remember that he was the captain from the tall grass prairie. He was Mickey Schuler, captain of the Aspen Grey Dog Unit. I also gave my name. I am squad leader of the Nerelia Kingdom, Anklid. At the moment I was about to die, I finally understood one thing. To learn this technique, I didn't need the concentration that comes from facing death with fear, but rather lacked a strategic opponent who could match my abilities. After I was killed and reborn, Ragnar again explained the key points of swordsmanship to me, but he felt that this time I seemed somewhat absent-minded, as if I felt like giving up. At this time, Rem called everyone to assemble for battle in the afternoon. I glanced at Ragnar and told him to hurry up and follow. Ragnar was even more puzzled. Why did the squad leader look even more full of fighting spirit? He felt I was becoming more and more incomprehensible, so he decided to get some good exercise today too. It was about the same as before. When the mist appeared, everyone panicked somewhat. At this time, I shouted for everyone to raise their shields to block. At this time, countless flying arrows came toward us. I said to Rem, "Follow my steps. Let's kill our way inside together." Ragnar heard my voice and said, "If you want to make a surprise attack, I'll go with you." Rem said puzzledly, "What's wrong with you two guys? What are you thinking?" Ragnar cursed angrily. "If you don't want a sword through your skull, I advise you to look ahead." I could see that ahead of me, I was already surrounded by a group of soldiers. The next moment, Rem directly smashed two people's heads with his axe. Ragnar did the same operation. Their speed at this moment was incredibly fast. This was about the same as the path cleared before. I met the enemy captain again. I showed a fierce expression and said, "Hello there, friend. Let's have a match." Hearing this, Mickey looked completely confused and said, "I didn't expect you came specifically for me." I laughed. "Is this the first time someone's confessed to you? I fell in love with you at first sight and came specifically to find you." Mickey had once led the Grey Dog Unit, and every member was a stubborn romance expert. The next moment, we two quickly engaged in battle. I needed to return to that state where I could only sense the sword. However, while searching for this state, I accidentally got stabbed by him. He mocked, "I thought you were a good opponent, but you lost as soon as the match started. I really don't know what you came here for." Only then did I realize one point. My mindset was wrong. I couldn't consciously seek that state. What I had to do was the same as the previous loop. Naturally fall into decisive battle and then comprehend. So I started looping continuously again, constantly fighting him. Finally, on the 18th loop, I once again saw the two-color world. And on the 28th time I saw it too, but still couldn't skillfully enter this state. This was the 108th time, and at this point Ragnar was about to tell me the essence of this sword. The instant Ragnar drew his sword, I saw the two-color world. Was that what Ragnar called sword intent? Ragnar's sword continuously enlarged in my eyes, but this time, no matter how fast Ragnar was, he couldn't escape my sight. The next moment, I directly knocked Ragnar's sword away with one strike. After hundreds of loops, I finally saw sword intent, Ragnar said with great shock. "I didn't expect you to actually knock my sword away. Did you avoid my sword by concentrating your attention on one point?" Ragnar was very puzzled about how I did it, because complete concentration meant completely controlling one's sword and body. However, I said nothing and didn't answer Ragnar's inner confusion. I had more important things to do now. Today was the time to end the looping day. Soon I met with the elf captain. I told her that when I went scouting before, I discovered the enemy had sorcery. The elf captain's eyes showed a puzzled expression, telling me to continue. So I continued. "The soldiers of Aspen call a strange-looking person a sorcerer." Hearing this, the elf captain immediately became interested and said, "Please tell me in detail." So I told the elf captain everything I knew. In the afternoon, it was still the same plot. The enemy used mist sorcery. A few seconds before the arrows were about to fly, I had everyone raise their shields to block. Then I took Ragnar and Rem toward the enemy's rear. The rest could only depend on our commander's ability. He could definitely solve this matter perfectly, and I had only one goal goal, to destroy that flag. And below this flag, there was someone waiting for me to defeat. Seeing my arrival, he also looked at me with shock. I skillfully greeted him. Didn't expect us to meet again, Mickey Schuler. I said, the first time I saw you, I wanted to settle things with you. Today is a good opportunity. The next moment, I charged out first with a sprint, but my sharp sword was easily dodged by Mickey Schuler. Then I saw he seemed about to make a horizontal slash. So before his movement fell, I used my arm to block the sword's back, preparing defense in advance. With a clang, the two sharp swords collided, making a harsh sound. Mickey Schuler was extremely angry in his heart. He was very puzzled how I had grown to this level in such a short time. Gradually, he faintly sensed danger from my sword. As long as he was slightly careless, my sword tip might pierce his throat. This was the intuition of a master. With a bang, our two bodies met again. At this time, Mickey asked, could it be that when I saw you in the tall grass prairie, you were hiding your strength? I gave him an affirmative look and said, I had my teammates with me before, so it wasn't convenient to reveal my strength. Now I can fight you with my whole heart. This time, you must remember my name. I'm called Anklid. The next moment, my sword was knocked away by Mickey. He also took this opportunity to quickly approach me. However, his movements were a different scene in my eyes. I entered the two-color world. Looking around, everything within sight was like slow motion. This was the wonderful aspect of this state. I could clearly know that Mickey had already shifted his center of gravity to his right foot. However, his next move should be preparing to swing diagonally. Sure enough, just as I had guessed, I successfully dodged his attack. I learned this technique from continuous looping. The experience gained through repeated practice was enough to let me defeat him. Now I could see clearly every minute detail of Mickey's movements, including predicting the direction of his attacks. The instant his body rushed up, I quickly thrust out a sword, directly cutting his neck. At the same time, I was also pierced in the neck by his blade. Mickey was greatly startled, thinking, when did his sword get here? Does he want to sever my head? He underestimates me too much. The next moment, after I slashed out that sword, Mickey quickly dropped down to avoid the attack. Mickey just felt I was too terrifying. At first he thought he could subdue me in a few rounds, but now I was actually evenly matched with him. Then he was so angry he almost bit through his molars. This was unacceptable to him. The straight sword and soft sword he used were both close to defensive sword techniques, so he needed to give me a fatal blow. It was also time to use the secret technique he had specifically learned to deal with this situation. This was an attack launched from below that would sweep away everything in a huge arc, and this ultimate technique was Mickey's final trump card, called Wheel Cleave. Unfortunately, his movement just now had already been captured by me. I had died under this sword technique no less than 20 times before, so this time I specifically watched Mickey's sword. All the tricks of his sword couldn't escape my eyes. I chuckled. Finally, it could end. After hundreds of loops, I had finally crossed another high wall. The next moment, I struck heavily on Mickey's sword tip. To be precise, I predicted his sword. Mickey was extremely surprised because I not only saw the trajectory of his sword, but actually blocked it. Mickey Schuler's family was one of the three pillars managing the Asben Principality because the family symbolized military force. So anyone with martial talent, whether from the mainline or branch families, would be absorbed into the clan. Mickey became a branch member of the Schuler family in this way. When he was 13 years old, he single-handedly challenged all the swordsmen in the village with just one sword. As he grew older, he became a renowned warrior throughout the entire city. He was a powerhouse in the Grey Dog unit, and there were few who could match his skill in combat. So he once had the same thoughts as Ragnar. Was it really necessary for these people to train until their hands split and their thighs swelled? In his eyes, swordsmanship was as simple as eating or drinking water. It was because of this mindset that he became complacent and quite arrogant about his own abilities. But now he realized that was nothing more than his past arrogance, and he was just a loser about to be defeated. The next moment, my sword steadily pierced into his shoulder. A moment later, I slowly pulled the sword out. Even now, Mickey still couldn't believe he had been defeated so easily. He felt it was just a momentary lapse because this guy in front of him was far inferior to him. I said, I admit you're right, but you still lost to me. The next moment, I raised my sword, ready to take his life. But only one of us could survive. Just then, my sword was blocked by someone. My body kept stumbling backward. The man before me was incredibly powerful. The enemy's guards also caught up and immediately gave Mickey simple first aid. That man calmly ordered his subordinates to take Mickey away to rest. Then he praised me, you came here alone and wounded one of my fierce generals. So he made a decision. He would make sure I died without leaving a complete corpse. Only then did I realize this wasn't the time to be careless. I was right in the middle of enemy territory. It would be nearly impossible for me alone to escape from here. So I could only change my target, destroy the banner above, then fight my way out. The next moment, several arrows flew toward me. I basically ignored the small fries in front of me. My target was only the captain in the center. I couldn't dodge all the incoming attacks, so I could only endure the arrow strikes and charge forward bravely. The enemy captain cursed loudly, "Let's see where you can run now." With a clang, I quickly raised my sword horizontally to block the captain's slash. However, after just one exchange with this captain, my sword actually started to crack slightly. It seemed this guy was using a heavy sword with heavy power. I quickly knocked his sword away, creating some space to catch my breath. Then I immediately drew a dagger from my chest and threw it out. My goal now was to escape and destroy their banner, so the curse would dissipate. But each attack fell just short of hitting the banner. The captain's attack came down again, but I dodged it, and at the same time, I gripped another dagger in my hand. This time, I was confident enough to hit that banner, because I was aiming at the connection between the banner and the flagpole, which would be easy to hit. The next moment, the dagger shot upward and cut down the enemy's banner. The elf captain looked panicked. He had clearly reported that the enemy would use sorcery and requested timely countermeasures soldiers from above. But they still had no preparation at all. It seemed this kingdom was already rotten to the core, actually sending such useless people to the front lines. If this continued, total annihilation would only be a matter of time. But just then, the elf captain sensed something was wrong. The smoke in front of him seemed to be dissipating. Even the soldiers in the enemy camp didn't expect the smoke to suddenly dissipate. So they quickly realized one thing: the banner must have been damaged. By the time they reacted, it was too late. The elf captain directly pierced his heart with one sword thrust. The elf captain shouted loudly, "The thick fog is dissipating. The enemy is panicking now. This is our best chance to turn the tide. Everyone counterattack." The elf captain's words directly boosted the morale of everyone in the army. The elf captain was very curious about who had destroyed the sorcery. At this moment, she already had a guess in her heart. Could it be that person? Meanwhile, I had several sharp arrows stuck in my body, and the knife in my hand had broken. All of this was due to my misjudgment. I thought that once I destroyed the banner and ran toward our army's base camp, I would encounter Rem and Ragnar, but there was no sign of them here. At the same time, Rem also appeared in an unfamiliar environment. He told the enemy soldiers to bring their sorcerer over, or else he would kill them all. And Ragnar's figure appeared in his own military camp. The officer said with exasperation, "What's wrong with you? Are you planning to rebel?" At this moment, Ragnar finally realized, could he really be directionally challenged? He had actually walked into his own army. At this time, an enemy soldier in front of me said, "You're in this state. Do you really think you can make it back alive?" Then he quickly raised the long knife in his hand to strike down. However, a leopard from somewhere bit tightly onto his arm. I recognized this leopard. It was the purple leopard I had seen before in the tall grass prairie. But what puzzled me was why this leopard would help me. This leopard was incredibly fast. In just the blink of an eye, it had broken the crossbows in the enemy soldiers' hands. This surprised those soldiers. Why could a leopard be so intelligent? After dealing with them, the leopard crouched in front of me to protect me. I advised it to leave here quickly, because what we were about to face was someone much more formidable than us. If nothing unexpected happened, I might die here today. At this moment, someone patted my shoulder from behind. It was squad leader Bensiji. He told me to step aside. He would handle the next battle. The next moment, Bensiji moved with extreme speed. To defeat someone with a heavy sword, one must use speed as an advantage. As a result, in just one round, he was sent flying back by the enemy captain. The opponent's strength had already far exceeded their level. Then he immediately ordered the soldiers behind him to fire crossbows at them, while the enemy focused all their attention on the crossbows. The purple leopard seized the opportunity to try a sneak attack. However, the captain just lightly poked it. The leopard immediately fell to the ground. This captain was indeed a very formidable opponent. The next moment, I once again entered the world of sword intent. The opponent's sword and his movements were now crystal clear to me. The instant his sword came down, I had already drawn a long sword and prepared to block. I couldn't resist his sword with my own strength, so I could only learn Mickey's technique of using softness to overcome hardness. The next moment, the same posture appeared on my body. Although I blocked this sword, my shoulder was also cut by him. However, this still shocked the enemy captain greatly. He questioned me, "That move you just used was using softness to overcome hardness. That's Mickey's special technique. How can you use it?" I succeeded in using it on my first try. If I didn't show off a bit at this moment, it would be such a waste. I said, "Such a simple technique can be learned at a glance. There's no difficulty at all." Taking advantage of the opponent's moment of bewilderment, Bensiji quickly struck with his sword. Seeing that the situation was hopeless, the enemy decided to retreat first. He threatened me viciously. "I'll remember you. You just wait." I looked directly into his eyes and replied, "I'll be waiting here for you. I'm just afraid you won't come." Then he waved his hand and shouted to the soldiers behind him. Everyone began to retreat. After they retreated, I immediately ran forward to check the leopard's injuries. I had to take this leopard with me too. Then Bensiji helped me up and said, "You should worry about whether you might die at any moment." Soon, more comrades carried me back. My eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Then I involuntarily closed my eyes. When I woke up again, I saw the leopard lying beside me. Standing in front of me were my teammates. They seemed to have been guarding me day and night. Seeing me wake up alive, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Then they immediately went about their own business. I said, "Why was I the only one injured in this battle? How come you don't have a single wound on your bodies?" At this moment, Rem stared at me intently. I felt a bit embarrassed under his gaze. I said, "Do you want to pet this leopard?" But Rem expressed no interest in animals at all. What he was curious about was how I knew that was sorcery. Sorcery was quite uncommon on the continent. If I said it was because I learned it through constant reincarnation, he definitely wouldn't believe me. But I also couldn't just lie to get by. Because Rem had helped me quite a bit, I had to be sincere in return. I said, "The person who used to live with me was from the frontier like you. He had mentioned it to me before, so I just reasoned it out based on that clue." What I just said wasn't exactly a lie, since I had indeed heard it from Rem. Rem wasn't stupid either. He said, "If you don't want to tell me, that's fine. Just don't let yourself become too interested in sorcery." I didn't expect someone so big to have such an active mind. He was quite perceptive. At this moment, I remembered something. Where had he gone during the battle? I had looked for him for a long time but couldn't find him. Rem chuckled. He had originally wanted to see what the enemy sorcerer looked like, but he really couldn't stand the sorcerer's face, so he killed him. No wonder I didn't see the enemy sorcerer. Rem had killed him. Thinking back to that technique of using softness to overcome hardness I had used before, I wondered if I could succeed again if I tried it once more. Jax told me not to force myself, or my injuries would only get worse. Ragnar said the same thing. "You'd be better off sleeping a bit more now." This made Rem behind them very displeased. He said, "Don't infect the squad leader with your laziness. If you want to slack off, go sleep in the middle of the road." Ragnar was angered by Rem's words and prepared to go get his sword to duel with Rem. Just then, Then, I said, I once naturally used a technique I had never practiced before. That was the first time I experienced such a thing. Do you think this kind of thing can happen? Rem picked at his ear and said, this kind of thing is normal, no need to make a big fuss about it, because your body has gotten used to the beast's heart and can now face opponents directly. Therefore, you can also carefully observe the opponent's sword techniques and power distribution. Ragnar also said, as long as your fundamentals are solid, you can easily understand movements. Now that you've also learned a bit of concentration, your vision will be broader too. However, they told me not to rely on luck, since that situation could only be executed once by chance. But before that, one would need to experience hundreds of real battles to succeed. It could be considered one's natural talent. When they put it that way, I understood. For me, that past today wasn't simply just one day, but several days of setbacks and struggles where I had studied hundreds of times with all my might to achieve victory. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but clench my fists. I had become stronger through my own efforts. I wasn't just remembering repeated days, I could feel myself gradually getting stronger. At this moment, I called out to both of them. I said, seriously, are you two free right now? I want to spar with you. Rem and Ragnar both cursed, you're crazy. In that condition, you still want to train. You really don't value your life. At this moment, the beautiful elf captain lifted the curtain and walked in. As soon as she arrived, she asked if I was the one who destroyed the sorcery. I immediately admitted it, since this wasn't something that could be hidden anyway. But what surprised me was why she came to ask personally. I said, because when I was scouting earlier, I discovered they were using sorcery. Although my answer was somewhat forced, the elf captain still didn't plan to continue questioning. The elf captain said, I just came to check on you. The questioning was actually secondary. After all, we two are quite fated, don't you think? What did this mean? What was with that ambiguous expression of hers after the elf captain left? Rem and Ragnar showed gossipy expressions and said, can you elaborate on this? Even the big-eyed boy outside the tent said, you're really brave, actually daring to pursue the elf captain. Getting to the point, the big-eyed boy came to find me this time because he had real business to discuss. He said the Night Order had returned today. After hearing his news, I said in shock, are you talking about the Red Cloak Night Order? The corps I belonged to was called the Cyprus Regiment, and its affiliated Night Order was the Red Cloak Night Order. Knights were people on the continent who possessed rare talents. So Night Orders didn't only have knights. They also had followers and disciples who followed them called retainers. When retainers were recognized by knights, they would become knight candidates, and above them existed knights who had transcended human limits. Unlike knights, retainers generally couldn't come to the front lines. Since they had come, it meant that the retainers who came to the battlefield would become knight candidates. Soon, noisy sounds came from outside. Rem told me to rest well in the tent, but at a time like this, there was no way I could stay here. I really wanted to go out and see. Rem glanced at me sideways and immediately saw through my thoughts. He said, it seems all your thoughts are written on your face. If you want to go out so badly, then you definitely have to go, or you'll regret missing this. Then I went outside and stood before a dense crowd of soldiers. My heart was pounding. This was the dream I had always held in my heart. Now I finally had the chance to glimpse the tip of the iceberg. Standing before us was a knight candidate retainer. His presence was incredibly intimidating. Every step he took made people's hearts race. The enemy leader shouted, fire arrows! In that instant, countless arrows flew out from the sky and fell down. In just a moment, the number of those arrows multiplied countless times. When these arrows reached a critical point, they all began to fall down together. However, these arrows never caused the retainer's expression to change even slightly. He quickly crouched down and placed his hand on his sword hilt. A white whirlwind gathered around his feet. Ragnar told me to watch carefully. That white whirlwind was Will. Soon this will slowly drifted toward the sky. With just one charge, the explosive speed and momentum had already intercepted the arrows in the sky. At this moment, the retainer's figure was about to rush into the enemy camp. This shocked me greatly. I hadn't expected his momentum to be so powerful. At this time, I clearly saw that the retainer had already drawn half of his blade from its sheath. With a swoosh, the retainer casually slashed and directly scattered the enemy formation. Some soldiers were even swept into the air by this momentum. This made me widen my eyes. Could a person really be this powerful? I hadn't expected someone to master and integrate three types of swordsmanship: the swift blade, the bewitched blade, the heavy and powerful blade. At this moment, I stood not far away observing the battle. Seeing the retainer single-handedly take on an entire army was tremendously shocking to my heart. But what I didn't know was, the most terrifying thing on the field was actually the 5 teammates behind me. After watching the retainer's battle, I also gained some insight. That legendary sword genius had once categorized 5 major sword techniques. Each category of sword technique had exquisite and masterful methods. If I could comprehend these 5 categories of sword techniques and merge them into one supremely vital sword technique, thinking of this, I slowly closed my eyes. Perhaps the answer was already in my heart. At this moment, the battlefield was filled with the sounds of killing. Rem and Ragnar beside me seemed to notice my abnormal state. Rem chuckled and said, it seems the squad leader is about to comprehend something this time. They protected my body. They couldn't let other things disturb the squad leader's enlightenment. All soldiers rushed to the front lines to fight. Only these 5 firmly protected me. At the same time, I once again entered the realm of meditation. In that long period of enlightenment just now, I discovered one thing. That was, through my continuous growth stronger, the walls I encountered would only get higher and higher. But this couldn't stop my progress. I would definitely climb up to see the scenery behind the wall. This belief wouldn't stop even on the day I became a knight. Soon, our soldiers shouted excitedly. They had won this battle completely. completely. After the battle ended, I also awakened from that meditative state. It was now approaching winter solstice. The war was about to end, and we would also welcome the busy winter and spring. At the same time, in the Asben Duchy, a country jointly founded by 3 families as pillars, the king of Asben was getting a headache at this moment. Those bastards had actually broken the rule of not letting knight orders participate in wars. Standing below him were Schuler, who managed military force, and Ekins, who managed administration. According to the news that came in, Ekins said they seemed to have discovered the frog general on the battlefield. Then they used this as an excuse to let the knight order participate in the war. But if the sorcery had succeeded at that time, this wouldn't have happened. Ekins' words successfully ignited the king's fury. The Grey Dog unit couldn't escape responsibility for the failure of the sorcery. Schuler's face looked grim. He planned to properly punish them when he returned. After Asben retreated from this protracted war, our troops finally began to return triumphantly. Next, we were to go to Shaochang, a border city directly under the king's control. After this victorious battle, the army began to prepare rewards for those who had contributed. First was Anklet of the 4th Squad, 4th Unit, 4th Division, who defeated the enemy's sorcery and was granted a commendation. Someone protested, "Isn't he that useless squad leader? How could he possibly break sorcery?" Everyone thought I had stolen credit from my subordinates. They thought I was just a bootlicker. I didn't want to explain much about this. Time would prove everything. But someone didn't like hearing others speak ill of me. "If you dare to gossip again, I'll cut out your tongues." My former teammate Anri looked at me with satisfaction, thinking, he's really getting more and more impressive. Bensuji also looked at me with the same expression, although he and I had some conflicts before. After I saved him last time, his opinion of me changed considerably. I went up on stage to receive my reward. I hadn't expected there to be so many gold coins. I took this money to the blacksmith shop, and used all the money to forge a long sword, because I planned to take the soldier advancement exam, so I couldn't use that broken sword from before anymore. Hearing that I planned to take the advancement exam, the big-eyed boy mind became active. He could set up a gambling den for this occasion. Soldier exam levels were divided into 5 grades. Different levels would provide corresponding treatment. To advanced levels, one needed to line up against 3 soldiers of the corresponding level and defeat them. As a merchant, the big-eyed boy quickly sensed a business opportunity and shouted for others to come place bets with him. At this moment, a mid-level soldier said, "You lowest grade trash actually want to challenge mid-level soldiers. You really don't know your place." It seemed my first opponent would be him. A mercenary by background, he was quite capable among mid-level soldiers. At the same time, the big-eyed boy betting box was stuffed full of silver coins, but only one person bet on Anklet winning. This bet made me the target of others' ridicule. The big-eyed boy laughed. No matter who bet, nobody knows the result until the end. I was extremely serious about my opponent before me. Up until now, I had only become stronger through repeated deaths. Unlike before, this battle had no risk of death, so I only had one chance to defeat my opponent. I made myself nervous. I only had insignificant talent and extreme effort. Because most people here possess strength I previously wouldn't have dared to contend with. I absolutely couldn't be careless. The opposing mid-level soldier shouted, "I'm coming! Have you figured out how to receive my sword?" The moment he moved, I moved too. The parrying I had become skilled at on previous battlefields. I absolutely couldn't be careless. The next moment, I swung my sword and actually knocked his sword flying. My opponent's sword seemed to be knocked away before it could even attack. His reaction puzzled me. What was going on? Before I could react, he shouted in pain, saying his fingers had nearly broken just now. I was even more confused. Was this person very weak? Did he become captain through connections? The next moment, I couldn't wait to knock him down. Then I wanted to immediately challenge the second person, because this person was really too weak. I hadn't even displayed 1/10 of my level. The green-haired man said to the big-eyed boy, "I didn't expect your trash squad leader to win. You know this result beforehand, didn't you?" The big-eyed boy pretended to be surprised. I didn't know the squad leader's strength was so formidable either. I bet on him winning to help him save face. But nobody believed his words. "You're his teammate. How could you not know his strength?" I gripped the long sword in my hand tightly. Maybe he was too careless, so he was defeated by me. So I decided to test my strength with the second mid-level soldier. This opponent was a white, bearded old man whose weapon was a long spear. I had some impression of this person. He seemed to be called a member of the elite heavy infantry squad. His special technique was to confuse the enemy's vision by rotating his spear tip, then launch a surprise attack. The next moment, the white, bearded old man's figure moved. But what nobody expected was that I cut through his long spear with just one sword strike. I hadn't expected him to just thrust straight at me like that. Was he using some kind of misdirection? Was he trying to do something else with the spear shaft? But when I saw his expression, I felt he had just charged straight forward. If that was the case, I should be able to beat him, right? Then I kicked him hard in the abdomen. I hadn't expected to win another round so easily. The audience below looked completely incredulous. At this moment, I clearly understood that if it were coincidence, winning twice in a row would be highly unlikely. So it wasn't that they were weak, but that I had become stronger. The big-eyed boy laughed heartily, asking if any other mid-level soldiers above wanted to participate, but many people didn't dare to come on stage anymore. Bensuji cursed, "Idiots! Those who looked down on Anklet before should know to be afraid now." The person next to him said, "Captain, weren't you the first person to look down on him?" Bensuji said, "Shut up. Nobody considers you mute if you don't speak." Andrew was perhaps the most shocked one, because after his last defeat, Andrew had been learning swordsmanship with Mag day and night, wanting to challenge me again. Mag said, "Give up. You can't possibly beat him. His strength has surged now. Even I would have difficulty beating him." Hearing this, Andrew chickened out. His body, which had just stood up, sat back down. Better not go up and humiliate himself. At this time, a mid-level soldier was kicked in the leg by someone, and the man behind him told him to go up and challenge Anklid. He wanted to turn around and curse at the other person, but when he looked, it was actually the most belligerent person from that trash squad. Under pressure, he could only timidly stand up and walk onto the stage. I was still contemplating my strength increase. Up to this point, all I had experienced were hard-fought battles, so I had never been able to experience the feeling of strength growth. Whether it was the sword-wielding soldier I encountered in the first reincarnation, or the assassin I met after that, or Mickey Schuler whom I encountered not long ago, or even my teammates who sparred with me daily, they were all very powerful opponents. These people's strength far exceeded that of ordinary soldiers present. My former swordsmanship teacher had told me never to underestimate opponents. I had always thought this advice was useless for me. At this time, the man opposite said, "Why does your expression look like you're underestimating me?" I chuckled. "I'm not underestimating you." But in my heart I was thinking, I hadn't expected I could now easily crush opponents like this. As soon as the match began, I quickly approached his body. I seized the moment and quickly slashed down with my sword. Although he blocked it, I felt he could only barely receive my sword strike. My country was also called the Land of Knights, and today I would prove myself here. With a bang, I struck down with my sword again, and cracks appeared in the opposing soldier's sword. He was completely dumbfounded. How could he fight with a broken sword? The next moment, I expressionlessly swung my sword again. However, this sword only touched lightly. I didn't actually strike down. But at this moment, he was already covered in cold sweat, and his eyes had become vacant. The next moment, he directly foamed at the mouth and fainted. The referee outside announced that the winner was Anklid. The scene was dead silent, with everyone in amazement. That person's strength wasn't weak, yet he couldn't last 3 sword strikes against me. It seemed this sorcery destroyer was indeed the one who destroyed the banner. At this moment, I proved myself amid cheers and applause. I hadn't relied on my teammates' glory, but had achieved this through my own strength. Andrew slowly stood up. He was convinced by those 3 sword strikes I had just delivered. Then he shouted loudly, "Sorcery destroyer!" This left me somewhat confused about what he was doing. Was he trying to boost my reputation? Just as I thought, Andrew shouted to his companions behind him, "Why aren't you joining me in shouting? If it weren't for squad leader Anklid, more than half the people here would be dead." The next moment, more and more people joined the shouting under Andrew's influence. This cheering went from initially chaotic to perfectly synchronized. Sorcery destroyer Anklid. I sighed deeply. Was it really necessary to chant my name like this? But Andrew was quite thoughtful. I should treat him to drinks next time. The big-eyed boy ran over and said, "Are you happy now? From now on, you're in mid-level soldier." Actually, no, I wasn't very happy right now because I hadn't defeated any senior soldiers yet. The big-eyed boy said in surprise, "Haven't you already defeated mid-level soldiers? Why do you still want to fight?" The next moment, a man stood up and said, "How interesting. He actually wants to directly challenge senior soldiers." When they saw who had come, their eyes immediately widened. Because they saw the eagle insignia on the man's shoulder. This was the kingdom's direct border guard unit. He was from that elite force where all members were senior-level soldiers or above. But how could a border guard butcher possibly appear here? I was somewhat curious. Could my next opponent be him? Sure enough, he cracked his knuckles and said, 444th Division Leader Anklid, would you be willing to have a match with me? People discussed among themselves. How could he possibly beat someone from the elite forces? Even Ragnar and Rem felt that the squad leader's current strength shouldn't be a match for him. The border guard's strength could rival Asbin's Grey Dog unit. That meant this guy might be able to match Mickey. I was quite curious whether I could duel without going through repeated deaths. All my previous opponents I had only defeated through repeated reincarnations. If this was an unfamiliar new opponent, I had no confidence in beating them. He was very satisfied with the look in my eyes, thinking, he doesn't show fear, even when facing someone like me from Special Forces. This made the man very interested in me. He thought fight me would be much more interesting than just watching the excitement. Many people below cheered me on. Don't let him act arrogant just because he's from Special Forces. Show him your strength. Let him know that the flower of the battlefield is infantry. The next moment, everyone shouted in unison, "The flower of the battlefield is infantry!" This left him speechless. You ignorant fools. Don't you know that Special Forces also belong to infantry? When the opponent saw that my momentum had overshadowed his, he also became serious. The next second, his figure appeared in front of me as if he had teleported there. But at that moment, I had already naturally entered the dual-colored world. I could see his sword techniques crystal clear. Just as his sword approached me, I raised my sword to block. He was incredibly surprised. This amazing concentration and perfectly balanced movement was truly unexpected. The next moment, he didn't strike with his sword, but instead reached out and grabbed my collar. He actually wanted to intimidate me, to make me fall embarrassingly in front of these people. But what he didn't expect was that my reaction wasn't slower than his. In that instant, I grabbed his wrist. Then I raised the sword in my hand, about to pierce through his head. His heart immediately sensed something was wrong. The sword fell heavily, striking the ground steadily. In that split second just now, he didn't hesitate to dislocate his own hand to break free from my restraint. At this point, he had caught his breath and was preparing to gather strength for a heavy blow against me. He was also somewhat angry. If he hadn't dodged quickly just now, he might have really died. With a swoosh, he twisted his waist and thrust the sword in his hand into my chest. But what he never expected was that I was fighting this duel with him with a resolve to die. I directly gripped the blade of his sword with my left hand. Then my right hand firmly grabbed his hair and pressed down, while my knee struck heavily into his stomach. That last exchange was evenly matched, but I still held a slight advantage. This time he was truly angry. He absolutely couldn't lose, or he would be mocked by everyone. And I had no intention of ending the battle either. either. Such a good opponent. I had to fight him properly. So both of us charged at each other with a resolve to die. The two sharp swords were only 3 centimeters away from each other's faces. Just at that moment, the elf captain's figure appeared behind him. The next moment, the elf captain directly knocked away both of our daggers. The elf captain told us to stop fighting. If this continued, it would be fratricide. Hearing her words, I finally came to my senses completely. This was sparring, not a death match. He also looked terrified. Someone had appeared behind him with a dagger aimed at his neck. Looking further back, he was surprised to see that all the captain's team members were standing behind him. Rem said, "Your luck isn't bad. If you hadn't been stopped by the elf captain just now, you'd be dead now." He was too scared to speak, and instead said to me, looking at your murderous appearance, "It's just practice sparring. If we did this a few more times, I'm afraid you'd poke several big holes in my body." At that moment, I was still reflecting on the battle just now. When he restrained me, I almost could only surrender. But if we had fought to the end, I might have been able to beat him. At this point, he sheathed his sword and said with a serious expression, "I have to admit your strength is formidable." He extended his hand, wanting to get acquainted with me. "I'm Torres, squad leader of the Border Patrol unit." I also politely greeted him. "I'm Anklid, squad leader of the 4th Squad, 4th Platoon, 4th Company." Everyone was incredibly surprised to hear that the person was actually a squad leader of the Border Patrol unit. Wasn't that a special grade soldier? The next moment, cheers rang out from the audience. "Anklid, your strength commands our respect." Andrew's flattery made me very happy inside. I pretended to be calm and waved my hand, signaling them not to stop. I wanted to hear more cheers. Torres was very satisfied with my performance, saying, "I have high hopes for you." Just like that, my battle with Torres promoted me to senior soldier, directly skipping 2 ranks. Time flew by and it was already evening. A man invited me to join their team. This was the 3rd olive branch extended to me today. Because I had become a senior soldier and earned the title of Sorcery Destroyer, many people were inviting me. But I declined them all. I didn't want to leave the 4th Squad right now. But seeing the man's expression, I felt somewhat sorry. So I planned to send Rem over, but he said, "You can keep that troublemaker yourself." Then he waved at me and left, thanking me for saving all of them before. The big-eyed boy poked his head out from the window and said, "Someone else extended an olive branch to you. Do you want me to help pack your luggage?" After learning I had declined them all, the big-eyed boy sighed. "With your current reputation, the treatment wouldn't be bad no matter where you went." I was just about to explain my reason for staying when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around to look and was surprised that he had actually come. The person was Torres, who had sparred with me. This time he came to find me with only one purpose, hoping I could join their Border Patrol unit. This Border Patrol unit was directly under the kingdom. This was even better than the olive branch extended by the heavy infantry unit. All the team members were silently watching me, wanting to know whether I would actually go to the Border Patrol unit. Rem thought to himself, if it were the former squad leader, he would definitely go if the Border Patrol unit invited him. Torres had discovered in the previous battle that I was actually the same as him, a person who wanted to fight. If I joined their unit, he could give me overwhelming training volume and hellish real combat. He extended his hand and said, "Join our Border Patrol unit. Your strength will reach its ceiling in this lifetime." Rem closed his eyes, thinking, "It seems the days ahead will be boring." Ragnar closed his eyes, thinking, "The Border Patrol unit is an interesting place. The squad leader should agree." Jackson closed his eyes, thinking, "The squad leader would definitely be better off there than here." At this moment, I slowly said, "I refuse." Torres was somewhat puzzled. He didn't understand what my reason for refusing was. Were the conditions not good enough? At this moment, all the team members behind me opened their eyes. I said, "If you're talking about hellish training and real combat, then there's no place more suitable for me than here. Now I'm with these strong people every day. My goal isn't just to reach the ceiling, but to break through this ceiling." Time passed quickly, and now it was already winter. Rem was very afraid of the cold. He was now hiding under the blanket, shivering from cold. At this moment, I was just about to go out for training, and Rem asked me to bring him a heating stone when I returned. Odin stepped forward to tear at Rem's blanket, saying, "You won't be cold if you move around. Come train with me." However, Rem wanted to hit him, saying, "If you don't stop, be careful or I'll chop you with an axe later." Seeing that Rem ignored him, Odin said to me, "Squad leader, how about you come train with me?" But I had to go on duty. I'd find Odin after I returned. As I walked out the door, I could still hear Rem shouting behind me to bring the heating stone. Time quickly entered deep winter. The people in the city were bustling about, and the street vendors were all out busy very early. This time, the patrol assigned me 2 companions. These 2 people were Jack and Bo, respectively. Today, the 3 of us formed a group. Jack and Bo were soldiers belonging to the reconnaissance unit. I felt like I'd heard these names somewhere before. They flattered me. "It's such an honor to be on duty with the Sorcery Destroyer." Bo said to me admiringly, "How did you jump from junior to senior rank all at once? It's really amazing." I didn't refuse their enthusiasm, saying, "If there's time, we can have a good sparring match." Just then, a cold wind blew past. The 2 people behind me immediately felt extremely cold. At this moment, the street was still relatively normal. Everyone was busy with their own affairs. After all, everyone had to make a living. If they didn't work hard, they might not have food to eat. At this moment, I noticed the cloaked man ahead, because his walking posture was very strange. Just as I had predicted, that cloaked man's foot seemed to twist. The next moment, I hurried forward to support him, saying, "Are you all right? Be careful." With a thud, I died. A cold, sharp knife stabbed steadily into my heart. I didn't even understand what was happening before I was simply killed by someone. Just as I was shouting that there was an assassin, my mouth was covered by the 2 people beside me. I realized they were in league with this cloaked person, and were even helping him cover. The cloaked person said in a low voice, "Were you frightened?" His appearance was somewhat like a mixed blood elf. He should be an assassin from Asbin, seeking revenge for my previous destruction of their sorcery. With a tearing sound, sound, that elf slashed the knife in his hand to the right. After completing the mission, those two people also prepared to flee. They nodded to Roten above, signaling the mission was complete. At this moment, I finally remembered who they were. I had heard the big-eyed boy mentioned before the reconnaissance soldiers injured by sorcery, Jack, Bo, and Roten, who were said to be seriously injured. It seemed they had defected from the reconnaissance unit to collaborate with Asbin from within. I hadn't expected this mission to have some difficulty. When I opened my eyes again, I was already lying on the bed. This time I got up early and didn't waste words with that guy Rem. Then I came outside to find Odin. Odin was pouring ice water over his body to make his muscles reach a certain level of firmness. Odin slowly turned his head and smiled at me. "Squad leader, are you calling me?" This time I came to find Odin to learn about hand-to-hand training methods that could heat the body. In this cold winter, if we didn't want our bodies to become stiff, this training could let us face any situation in optimal condition. I said seriously, "Teach me, I want to learn this from you." Because at that time I saw the short knife the elf took out, but I couldn't respond in time. The main reason was body stiffness, which prevented my body from executing the commands my brain gave. Then I began my training. Although this process was painful, I had to persevere. When Jack got close to me, I should have been aware and knocked those two guys down first. At this moment, Odin told me to persevere. Even if tears flowed, I had to persevere. After training, I went on the mission again. I hypocritically greeted them, but in my heart, I planned to defeat them one by one. Along the way, they flattered me, but this time I didn't respond to their words at all. Just then, a cold wind blew past, and they came closer with tacit understanding. I flexed my fingers and found that all my fingers were flexible. Thanks to Odin today, I was now in optimal condition. Next was my time to counterattack. After preparing, I once again went on street patrol with the two team members. Soon, the elf-cloaked assassin appeared ahead of me. The moment he appeared, I immediately raised both my arms. With a bang, my fist struck heavily on the noses of the two people behind me. Bo thought this was bad. He hadn't expected to be detected. I didn't take those too seriously, but stared at the assassin ahead. The most urgent thing now was to quickly deal with these two guys, then have the energy to handle the elf assassin. Just then, the elf assassin 30 meters away instantly threw the throwing knife in his hand. With a thud, my chest was again pierced through the heart by that throwing knife. The whole thing happened in an instant. When the throwing knife pierced my body, I realized this speed was completely beyond human reaction. I hadn't expected he could hit my heart through the crowd at this distance. This assassin was too skilled. Without years of training, it was absolutely impossible to achieve his results. The elf assassin said, "A stubborn hunting expert will never forget his prey." As my body fell, I was still thinking about how to break this throwing knife that was faster than sound. This shocking scene terrified the ordinary people. I hadn't expected to die again, and this time more cleanly than the last. But only this way could temper my willpower. I should think about how to deal with this soundless throwing knife. When approaching enemies, the mixed blood elf would use sword thrusts. Otherwise, he would use throwing knives. This behavioral pattern wasn't difficult to counter. I felt this wall shouldn't be very hard to overcome. At this moment, Odin was helping me practice back stretching, saying, "You must train your body's flexibility well." Rem and Ragnar on the side said speechlessly, "It's just back stretching. Is it necessary to tremble like this?" Just then, Jackson came in from outside. He then saw the three people doing stretching exercises on the ground. He felt embarrassed because he never did this kind of basic training. After stretching, I thought about how to block the throwing knife. That knife's sharpness and speed were both extraordinary. Before I knew it, I had drawn the shape of the throwing knife on the ground. Jackson happened to see it as he passed by, saying, "Is this the whistle knife, one of the evil blades?" I looked at him puzzled, and he said, "The so-called whistle knife is one of the evil blades. The sound it makes when thrown is like a whistle. If it's a sneak attack, no one can avoid this throwing knife. If you encounter it, try to run away." Hearing this, I gave up the idea of directly confronting the elf assassin's throwing knife head-on. If even assassination experts like him were wary of it, then I needn't mention it. So I thought of another method, using the reincarnations to remember the throwing knife's position, then block it in advance. This way he would be helpless. With a bang, I again struck both fists on the two people's noses. Then this time, before Bo could react, I grabbed his collar. I wanted to catch these small fry and use their bodies as shields, but the result was beyond my expectation. This throwing knife had somehow pierced my body again. Looking up, I saw the elf had directly thrown 2 darts, killing Bo as well. Besides that, Jack didn't escape either. He was also pierced through the throat by a throwing knife. What shocked me was that he had thrown 3 throwing knives in just an instant. The elf assassin said again, "A stubborn hunting expert will never forget his prey." People on the street were panic-stricken, but nothing mattered anymore. I would start the next reincarnation. After he used Jack and Bo, he killed them. It seemed he had no allies here at all. I said, "It's great to meet you, because only an expert like you can make me continuously stronger." The elf assassin chuckled and said, "You're really crazy, still joking when death is at your door." Then he ended my life with one stroke. He had no idea what I was thinking. A wall was ultimately just a wall, and walls existed for me to surpass. In this realm of meditation, the ferryman appeared and said, "Don't you find this endless loop painful? The so-called curse means that however much happiness there is, it will bring that much despair in return." When I woke up again, I was already lying in the camp tent. I felt the ferryman's words were somewhat wrong. This shouldn't be a curse, but a blessing instead. After leaving the tent, I found Jackson and asked him to tell me some information about the whistle knife. Jackson found it sudden, asking, "Squad leader, why are you suddenly asking about this?" The whistle knife was made of several thin blade layers overlapping, so it made a whistle sound when thrown. Because this knife was extremely fast and almost impossible to distinguish with the naked eye, it was once called the throwing knife with only sound remaining. So if you encounter this knife, you must not try to see it with your naked eyes, because you simply can't see it. I nodded and said, I'll keep it in mind, but how should I defend against such an enemy? Jackson said, very few people use whistle knives. How could you encounter such an enemy? Even if you see a thrown knife, it's meaningless. It's better to observe the opponent's hand gestures in advance. After all, the throwing knife's direction is determined by the fingertips. Although there are techniques to hide throwing gestures, as long as you master those techniques in advance, reading the opponent's gestures becomes easy. Although he spoke in plain terms, I knew that reaching that level would require a lot of time. Jackson said with a serious expression, with your current stone-throwing level, you naturally can't learn it. If you want to learn, I can teach you throwing knife methods. But if you're not confident, then forget it. Hearing his words, I was extremely happy. I definitely wanted to learn this technique. In the afternoon, I came to the street again to carry out missions. Just like the previous times, the two people behind me kept praising me. I recalled what Jackson had told me before. When throwing knives, the whole body must relax at that instant. According to my time calculation, this elf assassin should appear soon. Then concentrate all attention on that instant. The method to dodge is the same. Sure enough, after I waited for 2.5 seconds, a pair of very familiar shoes appeared in my sight. At the same time, I quickly placed my hand on the knife handle. Without looking back, I directly slashed horizontally toward Jack beside me. Then I twisted my waist and caught up with Bo, who was trying to draw his sword. But his speed wasn't as fast as mine. I directly shattered half his body with one sword stroke. The ordinary people on the street were stunned. Was this person crazy? How did he suddenly start killing people? But I had no time to pay attention to them. The most important thing was still how to block the elf assassin's throwing knife. A cloaked figure slowly appeared in front of me. His hand was already prepared to throw the knife. I had to catch the trajectory of his throwing knife. First, I thought of protecting my heart. This way I could avoid dying on the spot. Then I concentrated on observing the enemy's fingertips. Just as I was still staring at his hand, the elf assassin's throwing knife had already hit my arm. I cursed silently. Why is this guy's speed so fast? Before I could finish thinking, another throwing knife directly pierced my heart. I failed again. It was really as Jackson had said. The whistle knife could pierce one's heart in an instant. But in this loop, I was already able to see the whistle knife's flight trajectory. Thinking back at the moment the elf assassin threw the knife, I did indeed see a flash of light. Just as the elf assassin was about to speak, I spoke first. A stubborn hunting expert will never forget his prey. The elf assassin was incredibly shocked. Why would this man know what he was going to say? I chuckled. Although the pain made me feel inhuman torment, I was still laughing, because I would meet the elf assassin again, and I would definitely subdue him easily. Then in this loop, I wanted to win with speed. So I stabbed Jack's neck with one sword, then quickly turned around and killed Bo as well. Now I had dealt with two. The remaining two were waiting for my judgment. The current me was completely different. I was no longer that useless youth from before. In the following loops, I stared seriously at the elf assassin each time. As long as I worked hard enough now, the throwing knife in his hand would become mine. With a few swooshes, the elf assassin threw the whistle knife at a strange arc. However, this time I made some preparations. I had protective gear bound to my wrists in advance. Seeing this, the elf assassin took out another throwing knife. At this moment, I raised my perception to an unprecedented height. The next moment, the elf assassin flicked his wrist and sent the throwing knife around to his left side. I cursed silently. Damn it, he thought of feints and deception to confuse me in such a short time. Although I realized it, my body couldn't keep up with my brain, and he stabbed my heart with one knife again. With a thud, I knelt on the ground. This time I wasn't angry, but calmly analyzed the opponent's previous actions. He could actually adjust his timing based on my actions. I pulled out the throwing knife from my heart, and the corner of my mouth even showed a slight curve. This weapon was simply too cool. I was already starting to want to possess it. I kept spinning the throwing knife in my hand. Then I aimed at the apple placed ahead and threw the knife from my finger, but I missed. Jackson curiously asked what I was doing, and I said I was practicing throwing whistle knives. But Jackson said that wasn't a whistle knife at all. I knew this wasn't a whistle knife, but I believed I would soon possess a real whistle knife. Just then, an embarrassing scene occurred. The throwing knife on my finger suddenly broke. Then that knife shot through Jackson's cheek like an arrow leaving the string. Jackson said speechlessly, "If there's a next time, even if you're the squad leader, I'll beat you up." Finally, in my 8th reincarnation, I was already able to barely keep up with the elf assassin's movements. At least I wouldn't be fooled by those crude deceptions anymore. Suddenly, I stared wide-eyed in disbelief at my chest. I hadn't expected my back to be ambushed by someone's sword, so that guy Roten had been waiting above for this purpose all along. In the 9th time, at the start of the action, I threw a knife upward. I directly pierced Roten's throat, so he couldn't interfere with my battle with the elf assassin. At this moment, the elf assassin said, "You dare to be distracted while fighting me." Then he threw another knife. I died again. The next day, I practiced throwing knives with Jackson. Jackson said in surprise, "I didn't expect your growth speed to be so fast." I said, "I've mastered the basics proficiently. Are there any other key points I can grasp?" Jackson picked up the apple and said, "You're already amazing enough. Have you learned throwing knives before?" I said, "I met a skilled person on the battlefield and learned a bit by observing his technique." Jackson thought, just by observing, he learned to this degree. Is he really a once-in-a-century genius? He said, "Have you heard of sword flicking? In the past, there was a Western assassin named Geller who created a technique that could apply to all throwing weapons. The reason it got this name was from a weapon called the whistle knife." Hearing him actively talk about whistle knives in this reincarnation, my body stiffened. He said, "Originally, Geller pursued a silent throwing knife using an extremely thin blade, but it was too difficult to control, so he improved it into today's whistle knife. I know you've heard of this knife, stop pretending with me." Because Jackson had already discovered that my posture was completely completely that of manipulating whistle knives, I didn't explain much. In my 10th loop, I decided to change patrol locations. Even though the two people behind me cursed at me, I insisted on changing patrol locations. I said, if you want to patrol with me, then follow. If anything happens, I'll take full responsibility. The two of them communicated behind me. What should we do now? Should we directly follow him to patrol other places first? I pretended not to hear and kept walking forward on my own. Soon we came to a desolate hillside. The market was the stage these assassins had prepared for me. I had no need to do as they wished. This should be a good burial ground. Then I directly confessed to them, what can you gain as soldiers doing espionage work? Money? The two were incredibly surprised. Had their identities been exposed? The next moment, the two panicked people immediately drew their long swords. With a thud, I directly cut one person in half at the waist. Then with a charge, I instantly killed Bo as well. I said, I came prepared, and your strength is inferior to mine anyway. How could you possibly survive 3 moves under my hand? I knew the next moment should be when their leader made his entrance. I saw 2 cloaked figures slowly stop in front of me. They were the elf assassin and the archer Roten respectively. They were somewhat shocked. They hadn't expected their companions to be killed before they even arrived. I twisted my head to signal them both to come at once. The battle would end quickly anyway. It was precisely because of this gesture that the cloaked figure immediately took out 3 whistle knives and threw them over. I had completely adapted to the whistle knife speed. As long as I could see it, I could dodge it. At the same time, that idiot Roten actually circled behind me, trying to ambush me. Last time I was shot and killed by him like this. This time I wouldn't be fooled. I swung my hand back, and the throwing knife held in my palm immediately shot out, rapidly heading toward Roten. Roten was instantly killed by my strike. He didn't know where the knife in his head had come from. At the same time, the elf assassin spotted the opening in that instant, because I had my back to him at that moment. But what he didn't expect was that under my cloak there was an arm with steel gauntlets hidden. At this moment, the elf assassin finally couldn't laugh anymore. This feeling was as if the opponent had come prepared. I slowly raised my hand, my eyes filled with disdain. What is this thing? Is this your toy? The elf assassin was afraid, saying, just who are you? Why do you have such powerful methods? I slowly pulled the throwing knife from my arm and said, you don't need to know who I am. How many of these throwing knives do you still have? How about we have a throwing knife showdown? The elf assassin was somewhat unsettled, thinking, he can also use throwing knives. Are we kindred spirits? I continued, I really envy you. I only have one throwing knife, while you surely have many more. I wonder if they'll be hard to block. Then I slowly stepped toward the outer circle. The elf assassin said, you're surprisingly confident. Aren't you afraid I'll seal your throat with one knife? The next moment, I raised the throwing knife in my hand and said, only at the end can we see who the real winner is. This time I didn't dare to be careless at all, keeping my eyes fixed on his gestures. Even if he could cleverly hide his hands, he couldn't hide his entire arm's movements. Focus on the enemy's whole body and dodge his attacks. This was the principle I had understood, being able to carefully observe every subtle movement of the opponent. The next moment, his hand kept spinning the throwing knife. My intuition told me he seemed about to fire 2 throwing knives at once. He indeed threw 2 knives. The knives crossed as they rushed toward me, but I dodged them. In that instant, my body also moved, quickly throwing a knife to counterattack. I looked at the opponent in disbelief. He had just thrown 2 knives, which meant he had even more. This was naturally what I wanted to see, because those would all become my spoils of war. The next moment, the elf assassin looked at me with a grin, as if saying, you didn't expect I still have 2 more knives. However, I directly ignored his showing off expression. With a finger clasp, I pulled out another throwing knife from my body. The elf assassin felt somewhat terrifyingly afraid at this moment. If his intuition was correct, he might be finished here today. The next moment, I quickly threw a knife. I wouldn't miss this fleeting opportunity to kill. The elf assassin's reaction speed was also incredibly swift. He twisted his waist and dodged my throwing knife. The elf assassin cursed loudly, you actually dared to deceive me. Then he drew the long sword from his waist. At the same time, I also held my saber in front of me defensively. The elf assassin quickly charged forward. He had a premonition that if this sword struck, he would definitely win. The elf assassin instantly reached in front of me. He chuckled. He had studied this sword stroke for 5 years, and he didn't believe I could take this move. But what he never expected was that I actually grabbed his sword with one hand. The elf assassin panicked. This was his first time seeing such a formidable person. While he was stunned, my arm suddenly pulled back, preparing to make a chopping motion. I said, I feel somewhat ashamed that it took me so long to defeat you. Then I struck his neck with one sword. No matter what, I had to end this reincarnation this time. With a thud, I struck down with one sword, directly killing this elf assassin who had made me loop over 20 times. My heart was incredibly exhilarated, because I had only used 20 reincarnations to kill the opponent this time. It seemed that failing in battle was the path I should take, because only this way could I become stronger. I was now almost crazy with happiness. Then I came to the elf assassin's front and glanced at him. I unhesitatingly opened his cloak. Many whistle knives were bound to his chest. I couldn't stop the laughter in my eyes. These treasures were all mine now. Soon I came to the elf captain's tent to report this incident. I said, the throwing knives on the elf assassin's body have all been transferred to me. The elf captain said in shock, you fought 1 against 4 and only suffered minor injuries? I nodded. The elf captain thought, when I first met you, you weren't this powerful. Now you've become so formidable. Then the elf captain said, I understand. You should hurry back and rejoin your unit. As soon as I entered the door, I found Rem's axe flying right toward me. Fortunately, my reaction speed wasn't slow, and I immediately dodged his axe. Rem said, you actually successfully avoided it. Now that assassins are targeting you, you must strengthen this aspect of training. At this moment, I tossed a hot stone from my hand, telling him to take the stone and move away away quickly. The moment he received the stone, Rem immediately beamed with joy. He couldn't do without this hot stone this winter. The big-eyed boy looked up at me and said, "If you want a haircut, you can find me. I'll give you a discount." Then we had haircuts at the door. With skills like his, if he went into business, he'd definitely be successful. The big-eyed boy slowly looked up. It was unexpectedly snowing. Snow in this weather was very unusual. It must be that damn demon's excrement that had turned to powder and drifted over. I had nothing to do now, so I reviewed the previous situation. How did the assassins enter the small city? When did Jack, Bo, and Roten defect? I asked the big-eyed boy about their backgrounds. However, the big-eyed boy didn't know much about this either, because Jack was originally a thief who was caught and then served in the unit. He seemed to be a fugitive who had committed the crime of offending nobility, but he heard that Roten was previously a guard of the Logan Regiment. All three of them had joined this unit a year ago and belonged to the same guild. At this point, I also remembered that there had indeed been many guilds during a previous period. There was one called the Thieves Guild. On the surface, it was a gathering place for thieves, but in reality, it was a den of criminal gathering. If theft occurred, it was definitely their doing. Jackson wondered why I was asking him about this. I scratched my head and said, "I feel like you might know something." Jackson said, "After a big personnel change, the contact network I had planted there was also cut off. I'm not clear about the situation inside either." Soon, the big-eyed boy finished cutting my hair. Rem said, "You look more handsome with shorter hair," but I didn't pay attention to my hairstyle at all. I looked at the increasingly heavy snow in the sky. So Jackson suggested, "Squad leader, how about staying outside today?" Rem said very dissatisfiedly, "You just don't want to shovel snow. What tricks are you trying to pull again?" Hearing Rem's words, I also felt something was wrong, though I thought his analysis made sense. So the two of them looked at me with burning eyes. I said, "Don't be like this. How about I use my squad leader authority to do a mission? As long as you agree, you won't have to shovel snow." The two said, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go quickly. We hate shoveling snow the most." Even the big-eyed boy who rarely took action was full of fighting spirit. It seemed they really hated shoveling snow. Then I told them to wait. I hadn't gone to apply yet. Ragnar mocked, "You haven't even applied yet. Your action ability is a bit slow. It'll be hard to become a good swordsman in the future." Then Odin also told me to hurry up and request a mission assignment. These guys were only unusually united at times like this. Then I came to the elf captain's tent. I claimed to have discovered a thieves guild and wanted to personally wipe them out completely. The elf captain looked at me for a long while without speaking. This made me somewhat anxious. She wouldn't disagree, would she? The elf captain questioned me with an extremely serious expression. "You don't want to shovel snow, do you?"